Live the glory of college football.
Balls over a man, into the end zone.
Come explore TuneIn's classic game replay collection to hear ESPN's complete coverage of the 2019 New Year's 6 bowl games. Don't miss your chance to re-experience the Rose Bowl, the 2020 National Championship, featuring Clemson and LSU.
There are going to be 2 champions on the field tomorrow night. There's going to be 1 team hold up the trophy.
10, plays to the 5, touchdown!
Search classic game replays to listen for free.
4 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney.
Will technology lead us out of this crisis?
The worst jobs market, potentially in history.
The Fed seems to have really flexed its muscles.
How quickly can we recover from this?
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
To wring out that buy-the-dip mentality, that takes time.
Are we looking at a more damaging break in the labor market?
Does the shape of the yield curve matter?
We're looking at late 2021, early 2022. Where it really feels quote-unquote normal.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
We're going to take a look at the energy business and why global oil demand won't snap back into old patterns after the virus. Plus, Barry Ritholtz, founder of Ritholtz Wealth Management and Bloomberg Opinion columnist, will get his thoughts on this bull market in the midst of a bear market. First, let's go to Greg Jarrett of Bloomberg News for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
Paul, so far this session, the S&P's been fluctuating, this after 5 straight gains. The tech-heavy NASDAQ has been edging higher and set a new intraday record after eBay raised its forecast for sales and earnings. Treasury yields are up as weekly jobless claims fell. We check the numbers every 15 minutes. S&P is now up 0.1%, up nearly 3. The Dow's up 0.3%, up 91. And the NASDAQ is up 0.1%, up 8. The 10-year is down 21.30 seconds with a yield of 0.81%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is down 1.7% at 36.66 a barrel, while COMEX gold's up 0.4% at 17.1170 an ounce. The dollar yen 109. The euro's $1.1342. The British pound $1.2607. Fidelity is launching 3 exchange-traded funds that will partially conceal their holdings. The Fidelity Blue Chip Growth ETF, Fidelity Blue Chip Value ETF, and Fidelity New Millennium ETF will begin trading today. The 3 equity-focused funds will be actively managed and reveal their holdings once a quarter, unlike traditional ETFs, which do so every day. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Bloomberg Markets continues now with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney.
Thank you so much, Greg Jarrett. It is that time. We take a look at small and mid-cap shares, which are posting some gains today. Dave Wilson, Bloomberg Stocks editor, joining us with more. So, actually beating some of the large caps, correct?
Absolutely, Lisa. I mean, you've got the Russell 2000 index up 0.5%, and the S&P 500's higher by less than 0.1%. So, smaller companies are getting the best of it in today's trading. Biggest gain in the Russell by far belongs to Kezar Life Sciences. The ticker is KZR. The drug developer has climbed 92% on favorable early-stage study results for a lupus treatment. You've got Spirit Airlines, ticker SAVE. Those shares higher by 24.5%. Spirit discount carrier participating in a broader rally among airline stocks, fueled by, among other things, American Airlines' decision to ramp up its capacity next month in response to demand. And then there's Potbelly, ticker PBPB. It's up 18%. The restaurant chain, known for its toasted sandwiches, said sales have improved in 8 of the past 9 weeks at locations open more than a year. Now, the steepest drop in the Russell belongs to Comtech Telecommunications, a ticker there, CMTL. The equipment maker has fallen 14%. Fiscal third quarter sales were lower than analyst average estimate in a Bloomberg survey. And Varex Imaging, ticker VREX, has lost 13%. The maker of X-ray machine parts is selling $150 million in convertible notes privately.
Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson, thank you so much for that small cap report. You know, for energy traders, one of the key questions is, did 2019 represent peak oil demand? And what's demand going to look like on the backside of this pandemic? To get some color there, we welcome Rob Barnett. He's a senior energy policy analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence. He's based in London. Rob, thanks so much for joining us here. How do you think energy demand is going to look on the other side of this pandemic? I mean, pre-pandemic, it was kind of 100 million barrels a day. How about post-pandemic?
Thanks, Paul. Well, one of the enduring effects of the pandemic is that analysts have had to adjust the scale on the chart. So whether you're looking at employment, consumer spending, things have fallen off a cliff. The same is true with oil demand. The shock is so deep in our view that by the time you're climbing out of it, some of the structural factors like electric vehicles, energy efficiency, biking, changing commuter patterns, teleworking, all these other factors will be coming into play. So we do think there's a very good chance that we'll look back over the long arc of history for oil demand and see 2019 as the peak. I would note, however, that we're certainly going to rebound from the lows we've touched here in 2Q. But what we're thinking is that this is really pulling forward a trend that we would have seen happening over the next 5-10 years anyway. The last time we spoke, we were talking about when that peak might be. But looking back, it probably looks like it may have happened a little bit sooner than we would have thought.
Rob, what would you say to people who would argue that because prices of oil have gone down so much, it lowers the incentive for people to shift to renewable energies? It makes the fossil fuels cheaper, and so it staves off some of the progress being made on building renewable sources.
It's very interesting. In some sense, you could build a very good model for oil demand without even thinking too much about prices. You simply want to know, well, what's population? Maybe you'd also want to know what's happening with GDP. But I would argue that in many ways, consumers are pretty agnostic on those prices. I mean, take a look at the airline industry right now. Represents about 8% of global oil demand, and it's probably going to be years before we see recovery in that space. And one of the things that I would sort of say that that will be a fundamental difference is I don't think we're going back to business as usual. You look at Air France, for example. They got a 7 billion euro bailout from the French government. Pretty big number for sure. And in order to get that, they had to agree to cut their CO2 emissions from their domestic flights by 50% by 2024. Well, the only way I know how to do that is you're either going to fly less, and if you are flying, you're going to do it with more efficient aircraft. So I think we are on the verge of changes that in many ways don't really play into what the price is at any given moment.
So, Rob, are you kind of surprised at the rebound in oil prices, given kind of your longer-term outlook for reduced demand on that demand-supply curve?
Well, I certainly think that the fall in demand is going to help to keep a lid on prices. But you got to keep in mind, just because you're adjusting the bar lower for demand, you still are ultimately going to need to bring new supply to market. And so I think the ultimate question is there, what's that cost, the cost of that marginal barrel? Remember, you've got to keep drilling just to keep oil flat, right, because of decline rates with the wells that you've already drilled. So in some sense, you could have declining demand and maybe price that would be sort of separated from that. But fundamentally, this is certainly a bearish factor over the long term. If demand really has seen its peak, it would certainly have a negative influence on prices.
Rob Barnett, thank you so much for being with us. Rob Barnett is a senior energy policy analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence, joining us from London. I think it's so interesting, Paul, when people talk about the work from home experiment that we've all lucky enough has been foisted into. It's interesting to think, well, if people stayed home even once a week or twice a week rather than commuting, how much would that affect the demand for oil? How much would it affect the demand for oil if people traveled less for business and ended up flying? Fewer times. These are really interesting questions. Unclear what the ramifications will be and how much gets redirected away from renewables toward fossil fuels as energy prices go down.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of a paradox there. So it's interesting, but I think you're right. Consumer behavior is going to be really key to one of the drivers as people think about their supply models and their demand models for fossil fuels here. But you could certainly make the kind of the longer term bearish call, as Rob is suggesting here, that it's just not. It suggests lower for longer for energy.
And right now, crude traded on the NYMEX, basically flat, just dipping. Actually, it's dipping about 1.8% now. Right now, let's head down to our 99.1 studios. Nathan Hager there with World and National Headlines. Nathan.
Lisa, after several days and nights of unrest, today is being called a day of mourning for George Floyd. The first public memorial for the unarmed black man who died in Minneapolis police custody is being held this afternoon at North Central University in Minneapolis. Floyd family attorney Benjamin Crump tells NBC's Today Show the service will not just be a celebration of Floyd's life, but a plea for justice. Charges are now filed against all 4 officers at the scene. An autopsy shows Floyd was infected with COVID-19 when he died. Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison was asked on ABC's Good Morning America whether that could be used against him.
You never know. Those kind of things are things that some defense attorneys are going to try to turn into. We don't think that matters in terms of proximate cause.
One officer, Derek Chauvin's, now facing second-degree murder charges for holding his knee to Floyd's neck. Last night's demonstrations over his killing were mostly peaceful, though there was some violence in New York City. The Associated Press reports more than 10,000 people have been arrested since the unrest began. A Navy veteran who has been detained in Iran for nearly 2 years is on his way home in an apparent prisoner swap. U.S. officials say Michael White is on board a Swiss government aircraft to Zurich, where Special Envoy to Iran Brian Hook and a doctor will greet him and accompany him the rest of the way back to the United States. White's release was part of an agreement involving an Iranian-American doctor prosecuted by the Justice Department. It comes after months of quiet negotiations. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
You've always relied on Bloomberg's strong Asian presence.
You didn't mention any particular areas in China. Let me just go to Hong Kong.
And now you need it even more.
Where are we in terms of understanding President Xi?
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
We're starting to see infections in some of the Asian countries.
Tonight at 6 Eastern.
Do you ever get the feeling some people just weren't prepared?
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
At age 30, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, you can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
This Independence Day, it's a Boston Pop salute to our heroes, presented by Bloomberg and Eaton Vance. While the fireworks won't take place this year, the Boston Pop's 4th of July tradition will continue, with new music paying tribute to the heroes of the current health crisis and honoring the memories of those we have lost. Watch and listen July 4th starting at 8 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Bloomberg Television, Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
COVID-19. Can the world...
For the friendships, for the fresh air, for the space to grow, for the knowledge, for the sport, for the outdoor education, for the wide horizons, for the academic excellence, for the future. Unleash your child's education at West Buckland School, a co-educational day and boarding school in beautiful North Devon. If you're moving to the southwest for a better quality of life, this is education without compromise, in what the Good Schools Guide called a gem of a school in an exceptional location. To see for yourself, find us at westbuckland.com.
If you can build that flat-pack wardrobe without looking at the instructions, you've still got it. If you can manage 5 keepy uppies on your first go, you've without question still got it. If you can toss a pancake to the ceiling and not let it hit the floor, surely you've still got it. And if you can just about fit into those jeans you bought 5 years ago, you've definitely still got it. Brute, still got it.
Hi, I'm Dan from NatWest Manchester branch. We know life's hard right now, but if coronavirus has affected your finances, we're doing our best to make things easier. If you're a personal customer, you can request a 3-month payment break if you're struggling with your mortgage, loan or credit card. Or if you need help with an existing arranged overdraft, you could get £500 interest-free for 3 months. Remember, every one of us is here to support you. There are lots of ways we could help. Search NatWest Coronavirus.
Eligibility and conditions apply to payment breaks. Overdraft up to your agreed limit if lower than £500.
This is a message from the government about the next stage of controlling coronavirus with NHS Test and Trace. To protect your friends and family, testing and tracing must become a new way of life. If you have symptoms, you need to get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we will contact you to trace people who you might have infected. From now on, if you're told you've been exposed to an infected person, you must self-isolate for 14 days. Play your part and do the right thing so we can safely return to a more normal life. Go to nhs.uk or call 119. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
At Asda, we've provided 3,500 care homes with priority access to delivery slots, and priority shopping hours are open to our care workers. We're also donating 250,000 face masks to care homes. Asda, we're all in this together. Please show ID for priority shopping. Check asda.com for times.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events. To standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
With millions of podcasts dropping new episodes all the time, how do you keep up with all your favorites? TuneIn makes it easy. Simply head to the home screen and find your new episode section to see the latest additions.
First, we're told that masks don't work. Then, we're told to wear them all the time. One week, we hear that the mortality rate is 2%. The next, well, who knows? In the time of COVID-19, there is so much uncertainty, and so much scientists are learning in real time, along with the rest of the world. So it's hard to know what you can be sure of and what's still a big question mark. Enter Podcast 19 from 538, where we'll explore the evidence behind the science in our fight against coronavirus. I'm science journalist Anna Rothschild. Each week, I'll investigate coronavirus mysteries, keep track of the latest developments on vaccines and treatments, Oh, and I'll try to edit out all the times I shush my family since I'm recording this thing from the chaos of my home.
Search Podcast 19 to listen today.
News 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Stocks have been swinging between small gains and small losses during this session today after fresh economic data indicated the coronavirus pandemic is still taking a toll on the economy. We check the numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day here on Bloomberg Radio. Right now, it's time for the red. The S&P is down 0.3%, down 10. The Dow is down 0.1%, down 33. And the NASDAQ is down 0.5%, down 50. The 10-year is down 17/32 with a yield of 0.8%. West Texas Intermediate crude's down 1.9% at $36.58 a barrel, with COMEX gold up 0.75% at $17.80 an ounce. The dollar yen is at 108.98, the euro $1.1330, and the British pound $1.2591. Sources tell Bloomberg that Nomura Holdings' U.S. arm is in talks to enter a joint venture with Ed Wolf's Wolf Research. Those sources go on to say that the structure of the partnership, which may be named Wolf Nomura, hasn't been finalized and could feature a revenue-sharing agreement and a subscription fee. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Okay, Paul, I'm about to draw a narrative from one day of trading, which is going to get me a lot of criticism, and I shouldn't do it, and I'm not going to do it with any seriousness. But hypothetically, if we could take today's trading action and create a narrative, it would be disturbing, because what you're seeing is stocks selling off, you're seeing bonds selling off, and this comes after more monetary stimulus than expected from the Euro region. The Federal Reserve is doubling down on all of its projects, which raises the question, have we reached the tipping point where all the Fed stimulus and the ECB stimulus in the world couldn't at this point completely wipe out fundamentals? Has it done its job with respect to pushing people into risk? And now people have to actually think about what's actually happening. Barry Ritholtz joining us now, who I'm sure will criticize me from trying to draw any narrative from today's one-day price action. Bloomberg opinion columnist, host of Masters in Business on Bloomberg Radio, and founder, chair, and chief investment officer of Ritholtz Wealth Management. All right, Barry, let's just say, hypothetically, that the action that we're seeing today goes on for a couple days. Could we draw some sort of conclusion about the efficacy of monetary policy at this point?
Absolutely not.
All right,
carry on. You have to understand that, humans are forced to live in the here and now. We exist minute by minute. We have a hard time conceptualizing the long term. The old joke is the days are long, but the decades are short. And monetary policy isn't the sort of thing that takes place, instantaneously. If I'm driving down the road and I turn my turn signal on, because I still drive my cars, I don't let the self-driving cars shuttle me around, that's how we exist. We turn our signal, we change lane. Meanwhile, monetary policy is the rust that is slowly eating away at the quarter panels in the back of the car. It's not the sort of thing you see second to second, minute to minute. It has a huge lag. It has a long lead time. And I'm always astonished that the Fed will say something and people just wildly overreact. Yes, the bond market will be reacting, but very often the bond market is discounting what they're expecting the Fed to do in advance. It's not, you can't look backwards. Markets are always forward-looking.
All right, Barry. So the Fed is doing what it's doing. The ECB equally, arguably, as aggressive as the Fed in terms of pumping liquidity into the marketplace. Does the market need more fiscal stimulus? It doesn't appear that way, at least here as I think about the last several weeks here. How are you discounting the need or the potential for more fiscal stimulus coming out of Washington?
Sure, that's been the $3 trillion question lately, hasn't it?
Yeah.
So I try not to engage in hindsight bias. I try not to take news I know now and go back and pretend I knew it previously. But back in the beginning of April, we had a conversation that shocked a number of people where I said, this is not the normal finance-driven or balance sheet-driven recession. This is an externality. Think of this as a meteor hitting the planet or a volcano. And we shouldn't be too quick to assume that the bull market is over when it's an externality, and this is clearly an externality, the COVID-19 epidemic, that as it begins to resolve, or at least as the markets begin to see the light at the end of the tunnel, they're going to recover far faster than people expect. And it's beginning to look, NASDAQ is 100 is at all-time highs, or at least it was as of yesterday. We are dealing with a market that is treating this event as external over the chasm of the recession. And by the way, markets seem to be doing something very similar with the protests that are taking place in the United States and the issue of police brutality and Black Lives Matter and et cetera, et cetera. People always are shocked that what looks like a disconnect is really the economy today and is today, and the market is looking 6-12 months down the road.
Yeah, although, Barry, some people could say we're not at the same place that we were 3 or 4 months ago, if for no other reason that companies and governments have taken on a tremendous amount of debt, which will slow growth going forward. What would you say to that argument?
First of all, for my entire adult lifetime, I've been hearing about the evils of the deficit, all of which turned out to be false statements and unproven. And, we heard once we cross 100% debt to GDP, that'll be the end of it. Japan has a perfectly fine economy with a 200 and something percent debt to GDP. We just crossed over 100% not too long ago, and people are still willing to lend to Uncle Sam at 1.5%. So we're not crowding out private capital. We're not causing inflation. We're not destroying the dollar. All the evils of the deficit I've heard my whole life turn out to be bad theory. It's going to get tossed out. To me, the better way to think about this is it's not so much the deficit as we now have a better handle, although still incomplete, on the mortality of this, of how contagious it is, of what we can do that is effective to bend the curve, to slow it down, to reduce it. Not only have we had a 50-state experiment, but we've seen what's worked elsewhere around the world. And people forget, back in February and March, there was genuine panic. We had no idea what this looked like. You don't get a 30% fastest drop in markets ever because people are comfortable. That is genuine panic in the market.
Barry, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it. As always, Barry Ritholtz, Bloomberg opinion columnist and host of Masters in Business on Bloomberg Radio. He's also the founder and chairman and chief investment officer of Ritholtz Wealth Management, giving us his years of perspective on the markets as Barry always looks long-term.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Stocks are little changed with investors focused this Thursday on jobs. 7-figure jobless claims persist. 1.9 million people filed first-time claims for unemployment benefits last week. It's the first reading below 2 million since coronavirus-related layoffs began in large numbers in mid-March. Charles Schwab won U.S. antitrust approval to buy rival TD Ameritrade, a $26 billion deal that further consolidates the brokerage industry. Schwab said that the Justice Department approved the deal, which the company expects to close in the second half of the year. America's largest private company will no longer release its quarterly earnings to the public. Commodities giant Cargill said it wants to focus on its long-term strategy, and disclosing quarterly results doesn't reflect that. And Uber's global ride-hailing business is down 70% from last year, a slight improvement from its low point during the height of the crisis. Courtney Donahoe, Bloomberg Radio.
You took the first step and quit smoking, but even former smokers may still be at risk for lung cancer. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know about a new low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early. It takes only 60 seconds and could save your life. You took the first step, now take the next. Visit SaveByTheScan.org for a simple quiz to see if you're eligible and talk to your doctor about screening. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
COVID-19. On days when it seems there are nothing but questions.
What about the pandemic emergency purchase program in Europe?
What's the medical side of this?
We try to ask good ones.
How long until we have an answer on what drugs can help us fight this pandemic?
How do you think this has the potential to rattle markets?
Does that mean we should shut down?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com.
It's a rather controversial question being asked.
Bloomberg, the world is listening.
If knowledge is power,
This is a message from the government about the emergency measures to support the economy during the period of disruption caused by the coronavirus. To help you, your business, and your workers affected, you can apply for cash grants, business rate holidays, statutory sick pay relief packages, as well as the coronavirus job retention and self-employment income support schemes. For information, go to gov.uk/business-support now.
The IBM Flash storage solution can be broken down into 3 S's. Speed, retrieve data fast. Scalability, grow your storage as your business grows. Simplicity, easily migrate and integrate with existing systems. Oh, and there's a 4th. It's surprisingly affordable, with a recommended monthly price of £200 for 26 terabytes. Order by the 30th of June and pay Visit ibm.biz/flash offer now.
Where do sports, culture, and basketball nostalgia collide? On their podcast, Knuckleheads, NBA veterans Quentin Richardson and Darius Miles sit down with athletes, musicians, and entertainers to get brutally honest, totally unguarded conversations about everything from current events to untold stories from the golden era of sports.
O'Neal. You know that, right? I tried to tip dunk all the free throw line.
Search Knuckleheads on TuneIn to listen.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Buckle up, race fans.
NASCAR is back in the driver's seat.
And you can cut straight to the action here.
With the Performance Racing Network on TuneIn, you can hear PRN's live coverage of some of this year's top events.
As NASCAR's top drivers, Kevin Harvick,
Clint Boyer, and more get back on the track.
Search Performance Racing Network to listen and see upcoming races.
This is Mike Golick Jr. from ESPN's Golick and Wingo. Every morning, Wingo, Dad, and I sit down to discuss all the news, drama, and highlights spinning the sports world that day. And with TuneIn, you can hear us whenever and wherever you go. Just search Golick and Wingo to start listening today.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games.
Bergeron, he scores!
With game replay on TuneIn, you can listen to every power play, slap shot, and goal of the 2019-2020 season so far.
Suter to Cunnin to Fiala, he scores!
And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search classic game replays to start listening.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
If you've been sitting at home for 4 months and dreaming of getting on an airplane and going somewhere beautiful, you're not alone. People are starting to fly again. We're going to be talking about that coming up, plus leadership in a time of crisis. But first, let's get a check of the markets. Greg Jarrett has that for us with the Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
Lisa, stocks edged to the red in the U.S. and in Europe. Investors are weighing concern the recent rally may have gone a little bit too far too fast with new stimulus measures and encouraging economic data. We check the numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500's down 0.3%, down 9. The Dow's a little changed, up 2, and the Nasdaq's down 0.5%, down 52. The 10-year's down 16 30 seconds with a yield of 0.8%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is down 1.7% at $36.66 a barrel, while COMEX gold's up 0.8% at $17.1890 an ounce. The dollar yen, 109.02. The euro, $1.1323. And the British pound, $1.2588. As business reopenings picked up nationwide, Americans filed nearly 2 million applications for unemployment benefits last week, reflecting a slowing, though not a halt, in job losses. Initial jobless claims for regular state programs total 1.88 million in the week ended May 30th, down from 2.13 million last week. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Boy, airline stocks are just ripping today. American Airlines up almost 25%, United up about 14%, Delta up about 11%. And that's on news that American Airlines says it's going to boost flying in July by about 74% as demand comes back stronger than expected. Mary Schlangenstein, U.S. Airlines reporter for Bloomberg News, joins us. Mary, give us a sense of what really American is saying here about the demand side of their business.
Well, they're saying that they've seen demand come back a little bit quicker than they had expected, particularly in domestic markets and particularly in states that have already lifted some of the quarantine rules like Florida and like Texas. They're seeing a lot of people who want to travel to destinations like beaches, amusement parks that may be reopening, things like that. And they're also seeing a little bit of an improvement in domestic business demand.
All right, so this is actually coming off a very difficult period. How much ahead of expectations is the surge in demand that American Airlines is describing here?
They didn't really put out a lot of numbers in terms of what they had expected versus what they're seeing. But, what they're doing is they're going to increase the number of flights on their busiest days next month to 4,000, and that's up from 2,300 in June. So they had been planning clearly, for around that 2,300 June level, and now all of a sudden they're bumping up to 4,000. And part of the reason for that is they're saying that their load factor, or the percentage of seats filled per plane, climbed to 55% last week, down from 15% in April, or up from 15% in April. And what's important to note was before COVID, load factors on U.S. airlines were like in the high 80%. So they've fallen a lot. They're still way below where they were a year ago, but they definitely are on the uptick.
Are they going to be selling middle seats? Is anybody going to buy a middle seat anymore?
Long term, all the airlines have said they can't block middle seats long term. Right now, the only airlines that are guaranteeing to block middle seats are Delta and JetBlue. The others are saying, we'll space you out as best we can, or we'll allow you to move when that's possible so that you're not sitting next to other people. But yeah, clearly that's going to have to go away because they can't make money by blocking off a third of the seats on their planes.
Well, Mary, I'm curious about the liability of airline carriers. If someone does get sick on one of their flights, could they be held liable if they don't provide masks and if they don't require a certain level of air filtration and sanitation?
Right. A lot of the airlines, in fact, all the airlines have enacted very sophisticated, very up-to-date cleaning processes for their aircraft. And they'll tell you that the filters on their planes are hospital quality filters and that the air is recirculated very often. It's not like once a flight that the air recirculates or that it just recirculates air within the cabin. They're doing, electrostatic cleaning. They're taking all kinds of steps. Most of them will give you a mask and a little packet of disinfectant when you get on the plane. A number of them are requiring masks to board the aircraft. And so I think, as long as they are complying with CDC recommendations and doing everything that they can, I'm not sure how viable a lawsuit would be about them, although I'm not a legal expert.
Mary, you mentioned load factors in the high 80s. It seems like every flight I've been on in the last couple of years has been 100% load factor. What's the load factor they need to kind of break even and start making money?
That's the big question that everybody asks is what do you need to be at break even? The airlines today are all still burning through millions of dollars a day. The government aid they got helped them with some payroll costs, but although you have this bright outlook or brightened outlook on more flights, all these airlines are still planning to cut jobs. United and American have both said we're going to cut 30% of our management and support staff. They have tens of thousands of employees who have already taken leaves or early retirement. And they are mostly offering a second round now of leaves for employees to take. So although it looks a little bit brighter, the industry is still hurting a lot, and it's going to be a long-lasting impact. The carriers are saying, we know when demand improves and we come out of this, we're just going to be a lot smaller than we were before it happened.
I want to talk about the routes that the airlines are willing to fly. How much is this really just focused on domestic flights, and how limited are flights to areas that have been harder hit by COVID? And then, of course, there's a question of international travel. How are the airline carriers dealing with that?
Right. The airlines have not added a lot of international travel. Right after the COVID pandemic really started spreading, they basically stopped all the international flying. I mean, airlines like American was making a handful of flights internationally each week. So it was a very, very small amount. They are adding back some international routes now. But they're also delaying some international routes. For example, American has added back a few for June, but they've delayed by another month until July or beyond a whole lot more of the international routes that they had planned to start. Part of the reason for that is there's confusion about, what country has lifted the restrictions, what countries are going to cause me to quarantine for 14 days when I get there, what tourist attractions in Europe are open. So there's a lot of confusion. And so people are more hesitant to book internationally. Domestically, the only place that is got a quarantine requirement when you fly there in place is Hawaii, and that's really dampening down travel to Hawaii. Southwest, for example, has not restarted their primary Hawaii service yet because of that.
Mary Schlegenstein, thank you so much. She covers all things airlines for us at Bloomberg News. Right now, let's head down to our 99.1 studios in Washington, D.C. Nathan Hager there with world's and national headlines. Nathan.
Lisa, this first of a series of public memorials for George Floyd is going to be held today in Minneapolis. The Reverend Al Sharpton will be among those delivering eulogies at this afternoon's service at North Central University. Sharpton says protests that have broken out over Floyd's death in police custody show the country is waking up.
When I see young white kids in some states that are red states that out there marching, I know that change is possible.
Other ceremonies will be held Saturday near Floyd's birthplace in North Carolina and on Monday in Houston, where he spent most of his life. He'll be buried privately Tuesday. President Trump has no plans to attend these services. He's facing a growing backlash from current and former secretaries of defense for his military response to the protest. Former NATO Supreme Commander James Stavridis was asked on Bloomberg Surveillance what Abraham Lincoln would think of images of armed soldiers standing guard at his memorial.
I think he would have been stunned to think that we'd hit this point over the exact issues that he had worked so hard to keep our country together, to overcome the kind of racism at its absolute peak and slavery.
Two top senators are asking the Department of Homeland Security for a briefing on what they call the role of violent opportunists in the protest. Republican Ron Johnson and Democrat Gary Peters say foreign adversaries and domestic extremists are trying to sow division. The Centers for Disease Control is working on a test that can check for coronavirus and the seasonal flu at the same time. CDC Director Dr. Robert Redfield announced that plan in prepared testimony ahead of a hearing on his agency's budget later today. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Elite advisory firms rely on BNY Mellon's Pershing to meet the needs of their most complex clients. Karen Novak, Chief Operating Officer at Pershing Advisor Solutions, explains how.
At BNY Mellon's Pershing, we bring customized insights and strategies to help you grow your advisory business and stay on the leading edge. We can support the needs of your most sophisticated clients with a full range of investment and wealth management solutions, from access to private banking to consolidated bank and brokerage custody. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength and high-touch service that BNY Mellon's Pershing can provide. Are you well positioned to stand out from your competition?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Brokerage custody provided by Pershing LLC and other services provided by Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC. Both members of FINRA and SIPC. Private banking and bank custody provided by BNY Mellon NA. Member FDIC.
How long? How much? How many?
This is a message from the government about the emergency measures to support the economy during the period of disruption caused by the coronavirus. To help you, your business, and your workers affected, you can apply for cash grants, business rate holidays, statutory sick pay relief packages, as well as the coronavirus job retention and self-employment income support schemes. For information, go to gov.uk/business-support now.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are working to
get things moving.
Sending spices to novice cooks.
Hairbands to kids.
Desks for home offices.
Delivering the goods.
Shipping footballs. Fruit trees.
And dishwashers.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
At Tesco, we've price-matched Aldi on hundreds of products, like bananas, peppers, chicken breasts, mushrooms, Warburton's bread, strawberries, even avocados. That's Tesco products at Aldi prices. Because now more than ever, every little helps. Tesco. Prices checked on comparable products from GB Aldi stores and online twice weekly. Price most often found matched excluding promotions. Selected Tesco stores excluding Express and all Northern Ireland stores. Products and their availability vary weekly and by store. Details at tesco.com/Aldi price match.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
Yeah, but it's unique times. I think there's unique circumstances, and we're trying to
standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
Wondering what to play next? Want to know what other TuneIn listeners are listening to right now? Head to the trending section under Browse to explore the most popular stations and podcasts on TuneIn today. Millions of listeners like you can't be wrong.
Buckle up, race fans.
NASCAR is back in the driver's seat.
And you can cut straight to the action here.
With the Performance Racing Network on TuneIn, you can hear PRN's live coverage of some of this year's top events.
As NASCAR's top drivers, Kevin Harvick,
Clint Boyer, and more get back on the track.
Search Performance Racing Network to listen and see upcoming races.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
The right time.
with Bomani Jones.
While he was gone, Al had some kind of vote to make him the managing. You remember he used to come up all the time in the Raiders game that he was the managing general partner. By the way, don't forget, there was a lot going on in Munich. But you know how tired that man was to come back and find out that Al Davis had strong-armed his team from him while he was gone?
Search the right time with Bomani Jones to listen.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Sponsored by Witham, a forward-thinking advisory and accounting firm helping clients to be in a position of strength in the new reality of business. Learn about their innovative solutions by visiting Witham.com. The S&P is headed for its first loss in 5 days, with the tech-savvy NASDAQ briefly climbing to an intraday record. That came after eBay raised its forecast for sales and earnings. Everybody's staying home, watching TV, and buying stuff. S&P is currently down 0.25%, down 8. Dow is little changed, up 2, and the NASDAQ's down 0.4%, down 36. The 10-year is down 18/30 seconds. The yield is 0.8%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is down 1.25% at $36.83 a barrel, while COMEX gold's up 0.8% at $17.1820 an ounce. The dollar yen, 109.07. The euro, $1.1313, and the British pound, $1.2592. JetBlue's up 18% at one point today, more than any full-day gain since March 25th as its sector advanced. Trading in the company's call options was triple the average. Trading volume was triple the average for this time of day. Seems people want to go somewhere. Right now, JetBlue's up 11.5%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett. This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
When there are crises, there's a question of leadership. How should a leader go around getting people to come together and get past the difficulties they're currently dealing with? To answer that question, we have David McCourt, founder and chief executive officer of Granahan McCourt Capital, also the chair of National Broadband Ireland, an entrepreneur for years in the technology, media, and telecommunications space, who has been atop many companies, many production outfits. Reading Rainbow, you won an Emmy for it. I loved that show when I was a little kid. You're also the author of Total Rethink, Why Entrepreneurs Should Act Like Revolutionaries. When you're leading through a crisis, how do you even begin to think about first steps when messaging to your staff, to the people who you are leading?
Thanks, Lisa. Well, I think the first thing you want to do, Lisa, is make your issue and the people you're leading issue the same. That's the very first thing you want to do. And you want to have empathy. And you want to spend as much time listening as you do talking. And you want to be consistent. And I think those are the things you're seeing some people in the business will do very, very well. And some, and some not do well at all. And I think on the government side, we're seeing a real inconsistency around those type of leadership qualities, which is contributing to the chaos and the problems we're having right now, which are obviously not only affecting us as a society, it affects us. It's just not good business as well.
So it's interesting, David, technology, we think about social media, the ways leaders can communicate is so different today. It used to be, you would hear from the White House via some formal press release with the White House stationery. Now it's a tweet. How has technology changed maybe how leaders get their message across to their followers?
Well, it's changed everything, right, Paul? I mean, it's changed overnight. We've all changed the way we do business, but I think the big change is yet to come, and there's a couple things that have to happen. Number one, we have to make sure we get connectivity to everyone, because right now there's a big urban-rural divide. There's roughly 3 million people a week that are moving from rural to urban because rural life in America and other parts of the world where I do business, the UK and Ireland, has just been decimated, and we need to make connectivity a human right, like clean water, not so they can get Netflix, so they can have educational opportunities, healthcare opportunities, jobs, products and services to make their lives better. So that's the big change. Right now, it's Zoom calls and it's being able to use social media to communicate. And when you think of social media, Paul, I think you want to really be thinking of that as Internet 2.0, right? Internet 1.0 was just moving ones and zeros more efficiently. Internet 2.0 was
was people communicating with machines at pace. But Internet 3.0, when machines are communicating with machines at scale, that's going to be a total game changer for all businesses. For all your listeners are going to have to rethink their businesses when that happens. And, of course, to make it fair, we have to make sure we have connectivity to everyone.
And I would argue that a lot of people are already making this shift mentally right now based on what we've experienced with the pandemic, with more people working from home, trying to homeschool or not homeschooling. But I'm just wondering, especially as we get the jobs report tomorrow, as a leader, how do you offer reassurance to people that they're not going to become obsolete? They're not going to be earning much, much less. How do you give that kind of confidence and rally support at a time of such massive technological transformation?
Well, maybe that might be the wrong question, because I don't think we can if we don't make real changes, because there's some systemic problems that we're not dealing with. Our education, our training is relatively flat for us 50 years. If you saw a classroom 50 years ago and you saw a picture of a classroom today, they look alike. The types of jobs we need in America are at a slope, an upward slope that's steeper than it's ever been. The traditional jobs are at a downward slope that is steeper than we've ever seen. So we can't give people a fake sense of confidence. We need to get people ready for the jobs of the future, and we're not really doing that. So you said that people have already made the jump. People have made the jump that have a job. So if you have a job, like the three of us do, then you can make the change. You can adjust your life. You can do Zoom calls. You can do an interview on Bloomberg Radio I'm in Los Angeles right now and you're in New York. But if you don't have a job, after this is over, you're going to be going into a market where 20% of the jobs aren't ever coming back. And the need for training for new jobs has never been so steep. So I think we have to address the systemic issues rapidly, as opposed to pretending that everything's going to be okay, because we have unemployment at the levels of 1929. We have this pandemic that is as fearful as the one of 1918. We have riots that are far more expansive than 1968. So we've got a lot of things going on that we have to deal with. And the best way to deal with it, I think, is not to give people confidence that it's going to be okay. Give people confidence that we're really going to address the systemic issues that we have. I think that's what the game changer is, and I think that's what everybody wants to hear. And by the way, I know this is a business show, so it's good for business. It's good for business that we give people their dignity and we give people a sense that we're going to address these systemic employment issues. That's my view anyway.
David McCourt, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your thoughts and comments here. David McCourt, he is the founder and CEO of Granahan McCourt Capital, also chairman of the National Broadband Ireland. And Lisa, he's also the author of Total Rethink: Why Entrepreneurs Should Act Like Revolutionaries. There's certainly need, Lisa. I think we can all agree as we look around what's going on over the last several months and really over the last week and a half as it relates to some of the civil unrest, for leadership both at the national level and at the local level as well.
Yeah, this is a scary time. It's a scary time for everyone, and it has brought about a lot of changes rapidly. People saying that it is accelerated, brought forward by years, some of the trends that we had seen, in addition to shattering a lot of people's notions of safety, of healthcare, and beyond. And there's a question of how we get beyond this. Who will bring us there? How do we get the confidence and the support in order to build whatever comes next? And Paul, that's going to be something that we continue to ask throughout the months ahead.
Exactly right, and I think that we'll be asking as we head into the November elections, and a lot of people will have an opportunity at the voting booth to kind of express their issues and their preferences as well. Kind of a mixed day in the market. S&P down 9, Dow flat, NASDAQ down about 0.4% on the back of another very difficult jobless claims number. For my co-host and Lisa Abramowitz, I'm Paul Sweeney, and this is Bloomberg.
In addition to Bloomberg Radio, you can catch the latest news and biggest newsmakers on Bloomberg Television. Look for us on DirecTV Channel 353 or check your local listings. Sometimes the simplest method is the best one.
A police officer.
Someone who protects the people
protects the vulnerable.
Focus on doing the right thing.
Building trust in your community.
Representing one.
Representing all.
Someone who is there in times of uncertainty.
Every day is different.
As a police officer,
you can make an impact.
Now's the time to make your difference. Become one of the 20,000 new officers. Search Join the Police.
People's Postcode Lottery's 30k a day is back. £30,000 will be won every single day by players in the July draws. That's £30,000 for every player in the winning postcode. Visit postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 18th of June to play in the July draws. PPL managed lotteries on behalf of good causes. 16 plus conditions apply. Play responsibly.
We're all having to get used to the new normal, and at Birkbeck University, we're experts at being adaptable. As London's evening university, we've been flexing around the lives of busy commuters for nearly 200 years. And you can find everything you need to secure your place for autumn online. From expert advice to virtual tours, a live chat with our students and course applications. Make the new normal, studying for the career that you really want. Search Birkbeck, and it's new problem solved.
Get your cook on with Asda, with Uncle Ben's rice 250 grams for just £1. And our Butcher's Selection chicken breast fillets only £3.40 for 650 grams. Why not whack it in the wok? At Asda, we're committed to low prices every day on the quality products you need. Asda. Selected stores and lines subject to availability.
At Tesco, we've price matched Aldi on hundreds of products like bananas, peppers, chicken breasts, mushrooms, Warburton's bread, strawberries, even avocados. That's Tesco products at Aldi prices. Because now more than ever, every little helps. Tesco. Prices checked on comparable products from GB Aldi stores and online twice weekly. Price most often found matched excluding promotions. Selected Tesco stores excluding Express and all Northern Ireland stores. Products and their availability vary weekly and by store. Details at tesco.com/Aldi price match.
Buckle up, race fans.
NASCAR is back in the driver's seat.
And you can cut straight to the action here.
With the Performance Racing Network on TuneIn, you can hear PRN's live coverage of some of this year's top events.
As NASCAR's top drivers, Kevin Harvick,
Clint Boyer, and more get back on the track.
Search Performance Racing Network to listen and see upcoming races.
Of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From New York to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power, where the world of politics meets the world of business. I'm David Weston. We start, as always, with the markets and what's going on, and Abigail Doolittle is here to take us through. So, Abigail, when I woke up this morning, I thought it was risk-off, but maybe it's changing its mind.
I would say it's jittery right now, David, somewhere between risk-off and risk-on. But to your point earlier today, yes, it did feel a bit risk-off, and that, of course, is the dollar found a little bit of a boost before the ECB meeting. That was sending stocks down, and, of course, stocks in Europe lower. At this point here in the U.S., we're looking at mixed moves, and the virus, David, seems to be coming back into play. Before we talk about that, though, we do continue to see this move into the cyclicals. We see the S&P 500 financials up about 0.9%. That is helping the S&P 500 be down less than the NASDAQ. The S&P 500 down about 0.3%. The NASDAQ 100, which is actually over the last 2 days, if you can believe it, David, against this current environment, been flirting with an all-time high, or I should say a record closing high, right now down about 0.4%. This is investors move out of tech, the stay-at-home stocks, into those cyclicals. But on the day, there was a sharp leg lower because right around 11 o'clock, stocks up about 0.2%, now down. And that came on the news that the Florida COVID-19 cases rose 2.4% yesterday relative to the previous 7-day average of up 1.6%. So this fear that everybody has, David, around the idea that will these protests and a reopening in the United States cause some sort of a spike or second wave, perhaps proven a little bit there in Florida. But one day does not a trend make, although I think that their cases were a little bit above yesterday. But you can see the reaction in stocks at this point.
Yeah, as you say, one date is not a trend make. At the same time, we're all on tenterhooks a bit to figure out what happens, particularly in these states that opened up a little earlier than others. One of the things that struck me is airlines. How about airlines? Talking about the COVID-19, we actually have some airlines bursting back now saying maybe air travel is coming back, at least a little bit.
Yes, American Airlines in particular, very positive, and that's helping the Dow transports trade to the upside. But American Airlines boosting their flights in the air on pent-up demand, many saying that millennials are willing to get back into the air. So that could certainly help a beaten down area of the economy, not helping the overall market so much right now, but the Dow transports, which have been down more so. Certainly that is a trend, a more positive, encouraging trend around the pandemic to keep in mind, David, if it continues.
Okay, what's going on with the dollar? Abigail, we've been talking about the dollar the last few days, and as the dollar weakened, the stocks went up. What's going on with the dollar? Is that explaining anything what's going on with the equities?
Well, so earlier today, the dollar had been slightly higher, and that was pushing the U.S. futures lower. It was probably weighing on European equities. However, after the ECB offering more support than expected, the euro up sky high, that's pushing the dollar down once again, down about 0.5%. So ahead of those Florida numbers, David, the dollar being down once again seemed to be boosting stocks up because the S&P 500 had been up about 0.2%. But again, on that possibly negative news out of Florida, taking a little bit of a leg out of stocks, even though the dollar is once again down, now down, I believe, for a sixth day. Really pretty remarkable. Today, not on the Fed, but on the ECB, those central banks that play, David.
So, Abigail, the other thing we've been talking about recently is bonds, whether there really is a rotation out of bonds and into equities. We've been waiting for that to really reinforce the equity rally. What are we seeing with bonds today?
So bonds are once again selling off. So that suggests, again, that makes the picture overall neutral because while you do have stocks a bit jittery at this point, investors not looking to those haven assets. As for your question as to whether or not we're going to see a rotation into bonds, it's really pretty interesting. That is truly the trillion-dollar question because there is technical reason to think that we could see a move out of bonds moving lower, investors not wanting those havens. If that occurs, where is that money going to go to? One particular spot, of course, could be stocks, suggesting the rally could have legs, but it's way too early to say. Something to keep an eye on for sure, David.
Okay, last one, commodities. What's going on with commodities? That's something we like to look at. Oil, but also copper.
Yeah, oil earlier was down, and if I take a quick look now just to make sure that I give you the latest data, we are actually seeing a little bit of a turnaround here. The Bloomberg Commodity Index up about 0.4%. We have oil still off. As for your question about copper, it's up about 0.3%. That's such an important commodity to keep in mind, David, because oil at this point to me feels a little bit like a casino play since it's been down so much and up so much, but copper true tell on the global economy, Dr. Copper, so up just a little bit, and overall commodities are higher. So that, again, adds to the mixed messages of the day, since that's a little bit risk on, even though we have stocks mainly off just a little bit, David.
We did get some economic data out earlier today from the United States. We did get some economic data. The jobless claims numbers were down a little bit from what they had been before, although still robust. Did the markets react to that at all, Abigail?
There wasn't so much of a reaction there. In terms of that data, though, the more important thing perhaps in the initial jobless claims, while very encouraging, going below 2 million for the first time since the pandemic, the continuing claims above what was expected. So that really supports the idea that this economic recession trough, this problem around employment, could last longer and be more painful than some think, and certainly what the markets up 40% from the March lows seem to be pricing. And that's something else to keep in mind as well, David, that economic data and that jobless picture. And of course, tomorrow we're going to have non-farm payrolls for the month of May. That will be very interesting to see how the markets react to that number when it comes out tomorrow at 8:30, David.
Exactly, Abigail. That's going to be a terribly important number that we get tomorrow morning about 8:30 Eastern time, jobless numbers, the non-farm payrolls numbers. But at this point, is it still a little too early to tell where the jobs numbers are going? Because there's still a lag here, and it's not exactly clear that fully we'll be seeing the reflection of what's going on with COVID.
That's an excellent point, because, of course, we've had this first wave of folks, unfortunately, sadly, tragically, losing their jobs amid the pandemic. And at one point in 1 week, the jobless claims greater than 6 million, I believe, steadily going down. But in terms of the overall slide in jobs, there's lots of thought out there, including here with Bloomberg Economics, that there could be a second wave of job losses, and that it could actually be for the white-collar job, because the slide through from the pandemic, it's probably going to take a very long time. There's a big commitment by many companies to not make layoffs. But as the economy slows and less revenue is coming in, you may see some of these companies, in particular, there was one bank a few weeks ago that broke the pledge among banks, if you will, Cantor Fitzgerald laying off other folks. You have to wonder whether that's going to happen with other banks, with law firms, with other white-collar jobs. That could provide continued pressure on the jobs picture to the downside, sadly. Hopefully that does not happen. But my personal sense of this is that it could take a really long time for all of this to play through the system, maybe much longer than what some folks are expecting. And certainly what the markets are pricing in, again, up 40% from the March lows.
Okay, Abigail, thank you so much for that terrific review of the markets in some detail. That is Abigail Doolittle. In the meantime, Abigail mentioned a couple times the ECB, the European Central Bank, took action this morning. It was expected to take some big action. It actually did a little more than what was expected. And to take us through what it means, what its significance is, we're joined by Megan Green. She's senior fellow at the Kennedy School up at Harvard. So, Megan, thank you so much for being with us. Give us your take on what was important in what the ECB did and what effect is it likely to have?
Yeah, so this was the ECB being really bold and proactive, even if it's not as much as the Fed has done, for example. But for the ECB, this was a big move. It increased its bond purchasing, the PEP program, by more than expected. It also extended it by 6 months, and that wasn't expected. But it also announced that it would be reinvesting the bonds that were maturing over the course of the next couple of years till the end of 2022. And that piece is interesting because normally the ECB is somewhat beholden to its capital key. And the capital key is determined by the size of each country's economy. So the ECB can buy up bonds according to it, which means they mainly had to buy German bonds and then French bonds and then Italian bonds because the German economy is the biggest and the French and the Italian. And the ECB has been moving away from this capital key a bit already with the PEP. But the reinvestment program means that they can actually even things out according to the capital key by reinvesting the bonds that are rolling off. So they don't actually have to buy up bonds according to the capital key. They can kind of sort that out later over time through their reinvestments. And so it's a bigger step away from the capital key, which means they can step in and be more active in terms of buying up bonds for the countries that really need it. And I think that's probably the most important piece of what they announced today.
So what was the urgency? Why did they need to do it? I mean, everyone expected it. I suppose there would have been a lot of disappointment if they had not done it. But what are the financial conditions like over in Europe? They'd already taken a fair amount of action back in March. Do they really need to really loosen up financial conditions more?
Well, they did. I mean, if you look at the economic data in Europe, broadly, it seems to be bottoming out and stabilizing. So we have found the bottom for most European countries. But based on the bond purchasing that the ECB has already done through this program, they were going to run out of money sometime this autumn. So they didn't actually have to announce more so soon. They could have waited longer. But again, this was more a signal that they're going to do whatever it takes and that, they're going to prevent fragmentation in the Eurozone. And also it comes alongside a bunch of fiscal as well. So the German government just announced a huge fiscal stimulus program, which everyone's very impressed by. It's worth pointing out that Germany did this also back in 2009. So, countercyclical seems crazy. Germany does do that when it needs to save its own economy. And then the recovery fund that's still being debated among European capitals is potentially promising more in a kind of taken it to do proactively. But I think it's that in conjunction with a bunch of other fiscal measures that might be changing sentiment for some investors.
So, Megan, that was actually my question about the fiscal. To what extent is there some relationship between what the ECB is doing and the possibility of fiscal, not just Germany, but also the 750 billion euro that's been talked about by Ms. von der Leyen? Are they really making it easier for governments over there to borrow money on the fiscal side by keeping the rates down, the costs down on the monetary side?
Compressing borrowing costs for countries, and that only helps because, of course, your debts. Think about when you're looking at debt sustainability, but and right now, for most of the Eurozone and also for most of the developed world, borrowing costs are incredibly low, and that's the biggest role that central banks are actually playing. So that does help, but with the recovery fund in particular, they're looking at actually issuing AAA European securities, and so that will have its own borrowing costs, which should be really low given that it's European and given that the credit rating is so high. And so that should come with really low borrowing costs as well. And the important thing about that is that it's borrowed as debt, but it's given out as grants to countries. So it is a fiscal transfer of sorts. If we don't know all the details, we don't know all the conditions. They're busy kind of horse trading over it still, but it probably won't be a game changer for any of the countries that really need it. And Italy comes front and center. Yep. So Italy might get around 25 billion euros out of it. That won't be added on to its debt, and that's helpful. That's not a game changer for Italy, though. It's more important in terms of the political signal that it's sending that actually Germany and some of the other northern European countries are agreeing to any kind of risk sharing at all, and any kind of fiscal transfer. And it's not macroeconomically important this time, but it can be beefed up again in the next crisis. So it is a bit of an open door politically.
Okay, Megan, really appreciate you being there. I apologize to our audience for some of those technical difficulties, but we heard enough of what Megan Green had to say, which was important. That's Megan Green. She's a senior fellow up at the Kennedy School at Harvard. Coming up here, we're going to talk with a congressman from just outside Los Angeles. She is Judy Chu, about what's going on in her district and Los Angeles more generally. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
Market upheavals.
The narrative is driven by uncertainty.
This is an important update from the government about coronavirus. We all need to stay alert so we can control the virus and reduce the risk of infection. Staying alert means you must stay at home as much as possible. Work from home if you can. Limit contact with others. Keep your distance if you go out. And wash your hands regularly. Do not leave home if you or anyone in your household has symptoms. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Hi, I'm Dan from NatWest Manchester branch. We know life's hard right now, but if coronavirus has affected your finances, we're doing our best to make things easier. If you're a personal customer, you can request a 3-month payment break if you're struggling with your mortgage, loan or credit card. Or if you need help with an existing arranged overdraft, you could get £500 interest-free for 3 months. Remember, every one of us is here to support you. There are lots of ways we could help. Search NatWest Coronavirus.
Eligibility and conditions apply to payment breaks. Overdraft up to your agreed limit if lower than £500.
Get your cook on with Asda. With Uncle Ben's rice, 250 grams for just £1. And our Butcher's Selection chicken breast fillets only £4.40 for 650 grams. Why not whack it in the wok? At Asda, we're committed to low prices every day on the quality products you need. Asda. Selected stores and lines subject to availability.
This is a message from the RNLI and Her Majesty's Coast Guard. Beach lifeguards can't be everywhere this summer, so they can't always protect your family, but you can. So keep an eye on your loved ones. Avoid taking risks in the sea. Don't use inflatables. In an emergency, dial 999 for the Coast Guard. Get more advice at rnli.org/beach2020. Thank you.
Trey Wingo here from ESPN's Golic and Wingo. Every morning, Mike Golic Jr. and I sit down to discuss all the news, drama, and highlights spinning the sports world that day. And with TuneIn, you can hear us whenever and wherever you go. Just search Golic and Wingo and start listening today.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games.
This shot score, Malkin again! Bergeron, he scores!
With game replay on TuneIn, you can listen to every power play, slap shot, and goal of the 2019-2020 season so far.
Suter To Connor, to Fiala. He scores!
And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search Classic Game Replays to start listening.
Are you ready for the realest first-hand take of what's happening in the NBA? On their podcast, All the Smoke, former NBA players Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson bring their fiery intensity to the mic, dishing on the latest news and drama from on and off the court without boundaries.
Half man, half amazing. My friend, our brother, Vince Carter, man, welcome to the show.
Yo, what's up, man? What's up, brother? Man,
Search All the Smoke on TuneIn to listen.
Buckle up, race fans.
NASCAR is back in the driver's seat.
And you can cut straight to the action here.
With the Performance Racing Network on TuneIn, you can hear PRN's live coverage of some of this year's top events.
As NASCAR's top drivers, Kevin Harvick,
Clint Boyer, and more get back on the track.
Search Performance Racing Network to listen and see upcoming races.
Ready to talk brass tacks on what's happening in Major League Baseball? Turn to the Effectively Wild podcast from Fangraphs for daily statistics, analysis, and commentary.
One team will say, yeah, we're going to keep paying minor leaguers their stipend, and another team will say, we're going to extend the stipend through this month, and then another team will say, nope, we're cutting them off. So are extending it at least through August, which would basically be the end of the minor league regular season.
Search Effectively Wild on TuneIn to listen.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Wanna bet football can make you feel nostalgic?
Playing days are over, so...
On the podcast, NFL Alumni Lounge, Charlie Booth sits down with retired NFL legends to talk about their careers, life after football, and everything in between.
Mr. Darren Waller, good to have you. Yes, sir, it's good to be here. Dana White, welcome to the Alumni Lounge. Thanks for having me, brother. Big member of our NFL alumni family, the CEO of the XFL, Mr. Oliver Luck.
Charlie, good to see you. Thanks for having me.
We're here with the president, Mr. Eric Price. Good to see
you. Search NFL Alumni Lounge on TuneIn to listen.
Say with regard to the demands of the protesters for less money for the police, I see it as more money for the community. And in fact, that is what Mayor Garcetti was really emphasizing. We know that all the budgets of cities and states are going to take a huge hit due to the coronavirus. But if there is money in the budget, where should it go? What Mayor Garcetti is showing is that it should go to helping to provide more opportunity for young people, for people who are desperate right now, who have lost their jobs, who don't know where to go. And that's what I heard him saying, that he is going to find the money to make sure that there is more opportunity for people, because people are protesting the violence, the rates of the killing that has happened, especially with the black population, but they're also protesting the lack of opportunity, and we have to be able to give them hope. At the same time, we have to make sure that those who are committing these murders are held accountable, and that's why it was so important for there to be 4 arrests of the police officers in Minnesota. The reaction that we see right now is because there was irrefutable evidence that these police officers actually killed George Floyd. There it was, right on the video. And so people have said enough is enough, and it's really astounding to see the multi-ethnic protests that have happened, because so many people across America can see that this is wrong.
Well, let's talk about that for a moment, because we are all understandably and appropriately focused on our black brothers and sisters across the country and the experience that they've had. But there are other minority communities as well. And you have both Asian Americans and Hispanics in your district. How are other minorities experiencing this from their point of view, both from the sense of they're being discriminated against, but also some of their businesses, some of their homes are in jeopardy?
Well, thank goodness we took some steps forward, and now the protests are largely peaceful, and they've controlled the opportunists who've tried to do the looting. But what we see that the Hispanic caucuses and the AAPI caucuses, certainly in Congress, have stood by the black caucuses and the black community in fighting these terrible injustices. That is why I organized a press conference with the Tri-Caucus yesterday to show our unity, and that is why I'm hosting a national Asian Pacific press conference to show that an attack on one community of color is an attack on all of us. And in fact, the press conference is tomorrow. Now we have statements by over 150 Asian Pacific Islander groups that have condemned the murders of George Floyd and other African Americans in our country. And the reason that I think they have come forward is because we know that we all have to speak out when there are terrible hate crimes and brutal injustices, such as the anti-Asian coronavirus hate crimes and incidents that have been occurring in the last few months. But there is also, just historically, all these acts that have occurred, like the Chinese massacre of 1871, the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, the murder of Vincent Chin in 1982, and the continuous targeting of Chinese American scientists and engineers as spies and criminals. So we have to do something. We have to come together as a nation and support one another in fighting for a better America.
Okay, thank you so much for being with us, Congresswoman Chu. That is Congresswoman Judy Chu from California. Coming up on Balance of Power a little later on, we're going to talk with Jeffrey Sachs, the scholar and the author, about the systemic effects of inequality, something he's written about in his new book, Ages of Globalization. That's coming up on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
1 in 3 adults has prediabetes. 1 in 3. That means it could be you, your football buddy, your football buddy, or you, your best man, your worst man, you, your dog walker, your cat jogger. While 1 in 3 adults has prediabetes, with early diagnosis, prediabetes can be reversed. Take the risk test at doihaveprediabetes.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and its Prediabetes Awareness Partners.
Business and finance have always held surprises, but this is brand new.
The move risks fueling more demonstrations, and Stokes' concern that essential freedoms will be curbed.
Karen Muskow and Nathan Hager.
Chinese lawmakers approved national security legislation.
Expert navigation through uncharted territory.
Tell us the range of outcomes that we could see on that front.
Bloomberg Daybreak, weekday mornings at 5 Eastern. On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. Our stock of the hour, believe it or not, is American Airlines, because it's up because it appears that air travel may be coming back. And to explain that phenomenon to us, we now welcome Kaylee Lines. Kaylee?
Yeah, David, American is up in a big way. It's higher by some 26%. Best day for the stock in about 2 months. And bluer skies really just earlier than a lot of people expected. American announced that it's upping its capacity for July by 74% from current levels. They're going to fly about 4,000 flights on the busiest day of the month. That's up from about 2,300 flights in June. So this is a big relative improvement, really because they say there's been a surprise rebound in travel demand. The company executive said that the consumer is, quote, hungry to travel as shelter-in-place orders start to lift across the country. But this is really domestic, David. International is still pretty weak. They're planning to fly less than 20% of last year's overseas capacity. Plus, we have to keep in mind that the planes that they are flying, both here and abroad, have fewer people on them to support social distancing. And I would note, too, that this is by no means a normal scenario when you compare it to last year. They're only going to be flying about 40% of the capacity from July. But this may just be a picture of the new normal starting to look a lot better. And that doesn't just apply to American. Basically, half of the top stocks in the top 10 of the S&P 500 today are airline stocks. A big rally. They're all up double digits today, David.
Thank you so much, Acadia Lyons. Coming up next, Professor Jeffrey Sachs of Columbia. And he's going to talk to us about inequality, about globalization, and about the digital age. That's next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. New claims for unemployment benefits are slowing, but they're still high. The government reports nearly 1.9 million people filed first-time claims for benefits last week. That was the first time jobless claims were below 2 million since mid-March, a sign the economy is beginning to pick up. Meanwhile, airlines are seeing a little more demand. American Airlines shares are up by about a quarter of their value and says it expects to fly in July about 55% of the domestic capacity of the same time a year ago. But the COVID-19 pandemic is weighing on men's dress attire. Tailored Brands, the owner of Joseph A. Bank and Men's Warehouse, say closed offices is killing men's suit sales. On Wall Street, U.S. stocks are edging lower. The Dow is falling 6 points, NASDAQ down 42, S&P dropping 9. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Listen, as a hiring manager, I've got to tell you, the best job candidate isn't always the typical candidate. Sometimes they're a grad of life.
Meet the grads of life. Young adults of unique determination and experience. An ideal fit for your company in an entry-level position, internship, or mentorship. They might not have every qualification you typically look for, but they're exactly who your company needs.
Sometimes the best candidates aren't the ones you're used to.
Go to gradsoflife.org to learn how to find, cultivate, and train this great pool of untapped talent. Brought to you by the Ad Council and gradsoflife.org.
In these times of loss and crisis, the people you trust to ask the questions you need answered become even more vital.
Should the president, though, impose the Defense Production Act?
Carol Masser and Jason Kelly.
Help us understand what we know so far.
Bloomberg Business Week.
They are on the front line of the impact of the coronavirus.
Weekday afternoons at 2 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg. World is listening.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. We have breaking news now on the Bloomberg. Just as we were away, Sheldon Adelson's Singapore casino reportedly is being probed over money laundering of checks, and the Las Vegas Sands stock is down sharply on the news. We'll keep you apprised of that as it develops. But now, with First Word News, we go now to Mark Crumpton.
David, thank you. The next round of economic stimulus for pandemic relief could be as much as $1 trillion. Bloomberg has learned Trump administration officials have delayed talks that were scheduled for this week. More than 40 million people lost jobs since states began restricting public activity in March. More than 10,000 people have been arrested in protests across the country since the death of George Floyd last week. That's according to a count by the Associated Press. More than a quarter of those arrested were in Los Angeles, followed by New York, Dallas, and Philadelphia. Many of the arrests have been for low-level offenses, such as curfew violations and failure to disperse. Hundreds were arrested on burglary and looting charges. China will ease its ban on foreign airlines beginning next week. That after the Trump administration demanded the country reopen to U.S. airlines or face curbs on its own carriers flying passengers to America. The coronavirus pandemic prompted flight cuts earlier this year. Iran is reporting a record surge in coronavirus cases for the second straight day. There were more than 3,500 new infections in the past 24 hours, the highest Iran has seen since March. Iran, which has been the epicenter for the virus in the Middle East, now has more than 164,000 cases and 8,000 deaths. It began relaxing lockdown measures in early April. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg. David?
Thanks so much, Mark. Jeffrey Sachs is a university professor at Columbia, where he teaches and writes on the subject of development through the ages, sustainable development in particular, poverty, and healthcare. He has now written a new book, just out, which is a comprehensive treatment of economic and social development really throughout history and around the world. It is called The Ages of Globalization, and we welcome Professor Sachs now back to Bloomberg. Great to have you here. Really
David, thank you so much.
Book, terrific book. I want to pick up on one specific aspect, which is very timely, I think, right now. We are now in what you call the digital age, the seventh of your 7 ages. And you say one of the challenges of the digital age is inequality. We are seeing, I believe, most would say, some effects of that sort of systemic inequality in the United States right now in the demonstrations we're seeing. What are the root causes of that perpetual and, frankly, growing inequality? To what extent does globalization or digitization make it worse?
I think digitization has played a big role in both raising overall output, but shifting it to a smaller and smaller part of society. And the COVID epidemic is probably going to result in a dramatic increased concentration of wealth. Think about it. Jeffrey Bezos, owner of Amazon, founder of Amazon, has increased his wealth by an estimated $35 billion since the start of this year, at a time that we have mass unemployment. We have the greatest unemployment, the largest loss of jobs since the Great Depression, rivaling the Great Depression. And yet the stock market is up, and some of the big tech titans are booming in their wealth. So what's happening, I think, is that we're seeing this dramatic wiping out of a large part of our economy, the brick and mortar sector. A huge amount is shifting online, and that is part of this digital trend that already has been leading to the concentration of income and wealth. When the dust settles, I'm afraid we're going to probably have the greatest increase of inequality that we've ever had in a short period of time.
Which is saying a good deal, because going into this, before the pandemic, we were not in great shape on inequality. It was growing to a substantial degree. There are remarkable statistics I know you've seen that, for example, back in 2016, 2017, the net worth of the median African-American family was 10% that of the median white family. So we had a problem going in. And then, as you point out, if you look at the COVID loss of jobs, it was greatly disproportionate on Hispanics and on blacks. What can we do to remedy that at this point? Because what we're seeing right now, I think, is certainly about police brutality, but it's about much more.
It's probably the case that when the calculations are made carefully, that the richest 20 Americans or so all white, I believe to be the case, have more net worth than all the financial wealth of the African American 40 million people in American society. I don't guarantee the number. I say this has to be looked at, but these are the relative orders of magnitude that we're talking about. The top billionaires, if you take the top 20, 30, have well over $1 trillion of net worth. Now, that's something like the financial wealth in the African American community of 40 million people. It's stunning what is happening in terms of the shocking, unbelievable, unprecedented wealth at the very, very top. Bezos himself with $150 billion of net worth, something we cannot get our heads around. And then people losing jobs by the tens of millions, with absolutely a disproportionate burden being felt by minority communities. This is desperate. What do we have to do about it? We have to become a decent society where everybody has access to health care, everybody has access to education. You don't have a generation of students with $1.5 trillion of debt now completely unpayable because the prospects have worsened dramatically, but it was unpayable beforehand. And that requires companies like Amazon to pay some taxes, not to ask for tax breaks from around the country, but to pay their taxes. It requires the richest people to pay taxes. It requires, in my view, a tax on wealth, which is so concentrated right now that we're going to wake up. In fact, we're not even waking up. We know it. We see it. We're awake right now that the budget deficit will be some 20% of GDP, perhaps. And then we're going to be told by the conservatives representing the voices of the richest people, oh, we can't do any more. We're going to have to cut benefits to the poor because of the large budget deficit. So it's an extraordinary time by any standard, David, and the concentration of wealth, not a deliberate part of this epidemic, but it seems to be the fallout of the epidemic is extraordinary. One more point I would add on this. The Fed has, of course, issued trillions of dollars of new credits. But the way our system works, it's not credits for a broad society. It's credits that go through the already large concentrations of wealth and allow them to buy up even more of the assets on a fire sale basis. So easy Fed credits after 2008 was part of the increased concentration of wealth after 2008. Now we're seeing it again in 2020 that what the Fed's doing to keep the economy from collapsing is also going to have an effect on increasing the already almost unimaginable inequality of wealth.
And what is the solution for that? Because I suspect that's a law of unintended consequences. I don't think that Janet Yellen said in 2008, 2009, or I'm sorry, Ben Bernanke said, let's make sure that we have money sent to the people who already own a lot of capital. But they did decide they needed to do this to save us from a depression. We may be having a version of that right now, but an unintended, I suspect largely unintended consequence is if you inject a lot of liquidity in the marketplace, it sticks with the people who own capital. And by definition, those are the wealthy. What can be done about that? How can you save the entire economy and not benefit the richest?
Well, first of all, right now, like you say, you take emergency measures to stop the economy from going into a Great Depression, free fall. The most important thing to do, by the way, which is the one thing we're not doing effectively, is public health across our country to stop the spread of the virus. If we don't do that, no matter how many stimulus packages we have, we will not keep ahead of the epidemic itself. Amazingly, we're not taking the most basic steps of contact tracing, isolating, and the physical distancing as a national standard. And so we're falling farther and farther behind the Asia-Pacific countries that have already brought the epidemic under control. But the next step, the one you're asking about, is we're going to see very soon the horrific inequalities that have come from this worst crisis of modern history, then I believe we're going to have to face that directly, heavily through a fair set of policies that give decent wages to all workers, that give universal access to health and education and leave time, which has been unfortunately so prevalent because of the epidemic itself, and to rectify some of the huge inequities of tax breaks for the rich or no taxes at all for many of our leading companies, and especially in the tech sector, and loophole after loophole, which enables these now mega companies to avoid any social responsibility. Right. If we just have national income flowing to this very small high-tech corporate sector, this is what's going to happen.
Right. Okay, Jeffrey Sachs, thank you so much. I'm delighted to say he's going to be staying with us so we can talk some more about that book, The Ages of Globalization, and apply some of what he's talking about to the entire globe. That's coming up next. In the meantime, we have some news breaking right now. Zoom Info has just gone public, and it has opened at $40 a share. The IPO was set at $21 a share. So it looks like all of us on Zoom all the time are helping the company. There's a little more wealth being created, I dare say. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
What began in China has expanded world.
This is a message from the government about the emergency measures to support the economy during the period of disruption caused by the coronavirus. To help you, your business, and your workers affected, you can apply for cash grants, business rate holidays, statutory sick pay relief packages, as well as the coronavirus job retention and self-employment income support schemes. For information, go to gov.uk/business-support now.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are working to
get things moving.
Sending spices to novice cooks.
Hairbands to kids.
Desks for home offices.
Delivering the goods.
Shipping footballs.
Fruit trees.
And dishwashers.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
Get your cook on with Asda. With Uncle Ben's rice, 250 grams for just £1. And our Butcher's Selection chicken breast fillets, only £3.40 for 650 grams. Why not whack it in the wok? At Asda, we're committed to low prices every day on the quality products you need. Asda. Selected stores and lines subject to availability.
At Tesco, we've price-matched Aldi on hundreds of products, like bananas, peppers, chicken breasts, mushrooms, Warburton's bread, strawberries, even avocados. That's Tesco products at Aldi prices. Because now more than ever, every little helps. Tesco. Prices checked on comparable products from GBLD stores and online twice weekly. Price most often found matched excluding promotions. Selected Tesco stores excluding Express and all Northern Ireland stores. Products and their availability vary weekly and by store. Details at tesco.com/Aldi price match.
Are you ready for the realist first-hand take of what's happening in the NBA? On their podcast, All the Smoke, former NBA players Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson bring their fiery intensity to the mic, dishing on the latest news and drama from on and off the court without boundaries.
Half man, half amazing. My friend, our brother, Vince Carter, man, welcome to the show.
Yo, what's up, man?
What's up, my brother?
Man,
Search All the Smoke on TuneIn to listen.
Wondering what to play next? Want to know what other TuneIn listeners are listening to right now? Head to the trending section under Browse to explore the most popular stations and podcasts on TuneIn today. Listeners like you can't be wrong.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games. With Game Replay on TuneIn, you can hear every matchup of the 2019-2020 season so far. And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search Classic Game Replays to start listening.
And if we get set, start your engine.
Buckle up. NASCAR is back in the driver's seat.
And you can cut straight to the action here.
With the Performance Racing Network on TuneIn, you can hear PRN's live coverage of some of this year's top events.
As NASCAR's top drivers, Kevin Harvick,
Clint Boyer, and more get back on the track.
Search Performance Racing Network to listen and see upcoming races.
Okay, here we go.
With the NFL draft in the books and the schedule set, check out a TuneIn podcast for daily updates on the lead up to the 2020 season. Like the Ringer NFL show, where a rotating cast of Ringer experts talk with players, coaches, and special guests about the NFL landscape.
A lot of the other teams that we consider...
Or ESPN's NFL Live.
If there are some delays because of the COVID-19...
Search sports on TuneIn to explore these pods and much more. Want to relive the glory of college football?
Pulls over a man into the end zone.
Come explore TuneIn's classic game replay collection to hear ESPN's complete coverage of the 2019 New Year's 6 bowl games. Don't miss your chance to re-experience the Rose Bowl, the 2020 National Championship, featuring Clemson and LSU.
There's going to be 2 champions on the field tomorrow night. There's going to be 1 team hold up the trophy.
10, to the 5, touchdown! Search classic game replays to listen for free.
You love TuneIn for live-breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
This is Mike Golick Jr. from ESPN's Golick and Wingo. Every morning, Wingo, Dad, and I sit down and discuss all the news, drama, and highlights spinning the sports world that day. And with TuneIn, you can hear us whenever and wherever you go. Just search Golick and Wingo to start listening today.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
A lot of progress under the U.S. created idea of the United Nations and its institutions. But I'm afraid the U.S. started to get cold feet about the idea of a rule-based system. We started to pull away, for example, getting out of the Paris Climate Agreement, which I think it was a terrible mistake because climate change is another mega crisis that we have to face. And then recently, the administration pulling out of the World Health Organization. I can only tell you, being involved in fighting the epidemic itself and also hearing from governments around the world how horrified other parts of the world are at the U.S. absenting itself from the global cooperative cause. We're pointing fingers, we're making blame, but the truth of the matter is we're in the middle of a global battle of humanity against a virus, and we ought to be cooperating urgently in order to make the world safe. We haven't made the United States safe for Americans. We haven't really contributed to making the world safe, and cutting off help for the World's Health Organization at the height of this battle is not the right way to serve our purposes or to serve the world's needs.
Okay, Professor Jeffrey Sachs of Columbia, thank you so much for being with us. Once again, he has a new book out called The Ages of Globalization. I highly recommend it. I've read it. I learned a great deal, as I always do, from Professor Sachs. Coming up, we're going to talk about President Trump's difficulties with some of his military. We're going to have retired Brigadier General Mark Kimmett here to tell us about the relationship of President Trump at this point with the military. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
Working from home, take a little more time for breakfast. Tom Keene.
How will this pandemic change your NASDAQ?
Jonathan Farrow.
When you look at that sector, some of these companies won't exist, will they?
And Lisa Abramowitz.
They've only continued to increase the delinquencies and defaults.
Crunch data topped with fresh world news. Bloomberg Surveillance. Weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. And now, watch us on Bloomberg Television.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong. Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
General Jim Mattis, former defense secretary, came out yesterday in strong terms on the Atlantic website and said that he really disagreed strongly with what the President Trump had done, particularly in that Farragut Square incident. This departed from a policy he had long had of not commenting on the present President of the United States. Here to give us some sense of the relationship today of President Trump with his military, welcome Mark Kimmett. He's retired U.S. Army Brigadier General. He also served as a Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense and as an Assistant Secretary of State. So, General, thank you so much for being back with us. It looks like President Trump is losing some of the support he had from the military. What is your perspective?
Well, I think the major concern that the military has is that this situation right now has gone from being an issue of law and order to one of being partisan conflict, and the military being put in the middle of that and potentially being politicized.
So is the military prepared to deal with things like crowd control as a practical matter? I mean, put aside the legality of it. Is it a smart use of federal troops?
Well, I think it's a mission that the U.S. military could take on quite easily. We've done it for years and years. We've done it under this situation 5 times in the last 50 years. L.A. riots, Detroit riots, post-Hugo looting that was happening down in the Virgin Islands. So your military can pretty much do anything that it gets sufficient time and training on so that if the order is given, they do it as well as they should and can.
So as a former Brigadier General, how remarkable did you find it that Jim Mattis would speak out the way he did? As I say, he had been steadfast before that, saying, I will not comment on this President of the United States while he's serving in office. And boy, he certainly commented yesterday.
Well, I think he did, and so did Admiral Mullins, so did General Allen. And behind the scenes, a number of other 4-stars are criticizing the president heavily. The issue is not necessarily can the president do it, is should the president do it, and how would the president communicate to the American people on how to do it. And I think that's really what has happened. As Jim Mattis says, this is a president that is dividing the country, not uniting the country, and he's really concerned that he now will divide the military from the American people rather than bring them together.
It's fascinating. We also had the civilian leadership of the Defense Department. Yesterday, Mark Esper, the Secretary of Defense, come out and say he thinks it would be a bad idea for the president to invoke federal troops to curtail some of the civil disobedience. What about that when the civilian leadership starts saying we disagree with the president as well?
Legally, he's on firm standing when the president wants to do that. I think it's important to remind your audience that this was done 4 times in the 50s to ensure that the desegregation laws that have been put into effect by the federal government were enforced by the governors down in Alabama and Mississippi. But this isn't the time to do it. Again, we don't want the military to be seen as the Praetorian Guard for this president. It is a military that serves the people, it serves the Constitution, it serves the Commander-in-Chief, but in that order.
General, you've had so much experience in CENTCOM and other places with our security situation around the world. Are you at all concerned that because of the civil disputes here in the United States, both the demonstrations, the riots, and then the reaction from the White House, that we may be taking our eye off the ball from a national security position around the world?
I really don't. I mean, we've got combatant commanders around the world at CENTCOM, at EUCOM, at INDOPACOM. They're not focused on what's happening inside the United States right now. They're too busy keeping their eye, as you say, on the ball in India, Pakistan, Middle East. So I wouldn't worry about that in the least.
Well, let me ask a related question. You were at State Department as well as at Defense Department. To what extent may we be undermining our position of moral authority around the world to really remonstrate with other countries? Today is the anniversary of Tiananmen Square. Is it a little more difficult right now for the President of the United States, if he were inclined to do so, to condemn China for bringing in the troops on those demonstrators over in Tiananmen Square, given what he's considering?
Well, I can tell you in the Middle East, there's a little bit of schadenfreude going on, particularly in countries such as Egypt and Iraq, where they're saying, look, the American was quick to condemn us when we were in the same situation they are in now. So you're right, we have lost a little bit of our moral authority. I think it will be important for this current situation to resolve itself, not only in the long run, but in the short run, so that we can get that moral authority back when we start working with our allies.
Thank you so much to General Mark Kimmett. Coming up in the second hour on radio, we're going to talk with Joe Watkins. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury. One of the world's great sandwiches, the tuna melt, is making a comeback. There's been an increase of over 30% in mentions of tuna melts across Reddit's 18.7 million member food community, and a 60% increase in mentions of canned tuna. Thank coronavirus shopping for that. The humble concoction of canned tuna, mayonnaise, and sliced cheese may be just the comfort food we want right now. Sandwich or not, it seems gym junkies are hankering for a fix. Almost a month after reopening, small fitness clubs in Georgia and Oklahoma are seeing 75% or more of their members back. Nationally, 30 to 50% returning members is a good sign. Legoland's reopening Monday drew thin crowds, which may suggest a slow reboot of the $19.3 billion U.S. theme park industry. In Orlando, Universal Studios will reopen to employees and some season pass holders this week, with the general public joining them June 5th. I'm Andrew O'Day, Bloomberg Radio.
You're living in a world built on science, political and economic.
You've got to believe the labor market gets hit.
Computer and medical.
Clarify where we are on a test.
It all makes a difference.
What do you think needs to happen in terms of governmental response?
And it's all here.
He expects the virus to peak quite a long time from now.
Get your science straight.
The hand-washing campaign, is this actually a good strategy?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg. The world is listening.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
Jelly. Jelly adjective. Jelly is a shorter, better way to say jealous. As in, Chloe, I am like so jelly of your unicorn phone case.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org, brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt US Kids, and the Ad Council.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing, LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. It is a down Thursday. Stocks are slumping in the U.S. and Europe as concern the recent rally has gone too far, overshadows new stimulus measures and encouraging economic data. S&P 500 index heading for its first loss in 5 days, while the tech-heavy NASDAQ 100 index also slumped after briefly climbing to an intraday record. Treasury yields rose as weekly jobless claims fell. Claims appear to be moderating, but underscore persistent weakness in the labor market in the wake of the pandemic. Workers filed nearly 2 million jobless claims last week, the least since March. The depression-like trend is expected to push May's unemployment rate above 19%. The government issues that data tomorrow morning, 8:30 a.m. Wall Street time. Here's where we stand. S&P 500 index down 19 now, a drop of 0.6%. The Dow is down 96, a drop of 0.4. NASDAQ is down 77, a decline of 0.8%. 10-year down 19.30 seconds with a yield of 0.81%. Gold up 1% right now, $17.17 the ounce. And crude oil retreating by 0.7%. West Texas Intermediate crude now at $37.02 a barrel. And with more on commodities trading, specifically oil, here's Bloomberg's Renita Young.
OPEC Plus members are wrangling over Iraq's commitment to cuts. Saudi Arabia and Russia have reached a preliminary deal to extend output curbs for an extra month, but the compliance of laggards has become a sticking point. While oil prices have rebounded rapidly since mid-April, the rally is faltering amid gathering headwinds. Renita Young, Bloomberg Radio.
And again, West Texas Intermediate crude down 0.6%. It is 1:02 on Wall Street. Time now for the Market Drivers Report, brought to you by SEI, with an operating platform designed to support all major asset classes, diverse strategies, and investment vehicles. SEI is redefining wealth management. Learn more at SEIC.com/IMS. And now, with a focus on American depository receipts, here's Dave Wilson.
Thanks, Charlie. ADRs are lower, though not quite as much as U.S. shares. The S&P ADR index is down 0.3%, and the S&P 500 is lower by 0.6%. Germany's buyer has dropped 3.8% in U.S. trading. A U.S. appeals court blocked the chemical company from selling a weed killer with the ingredient dicamba. The court found that U.S. regulatory approval granted in October 2018 wasn't legal. Russia's Norilsk nickel has fallen 9.7%. Russian President Vladimir Putin told the mining company and government officials he was unhappy with the handling of a fuel spill from a Norilsk reservoir last week. His video meeting with the executives was broadcast on television. France's Alstom has gained 4.3%. The industrial company reached a 5-year deal with an Italian firm to develop hydrogen trains for the country's rails. And China's NIO has risen 4.3% as well. The electric car maker said deliveries more than tripled in May to a record. The figures came out a day after NIO was raised to buy from neutral at Goldman Sachs. Charlie.
All right. I thank you very much. Dave Wilson, keeping track of those American depository receipts. eBay is raising its forecast for revenue and earnings in the current quarter as people flock to the digital marketplace amid the pandemic. eBay shares, they're up now by 7.8%. Recapping equities lower, 17-point drop right now in the S&P, down 0.6. The Dow down 87, down 0.3. NASDAQ is down 0.8%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is Balance of Power.
Everybody in the world has one common enemy, and that's to win the war against this virus.
The first thing you do is listen to the medical professionals.
Those people that lost their pay, we want to see that pay continued.
Where the world of politics meets the world of business.
Our priority is the health and well-being and the lives of the American people.
We want to make sure that we are continuing to support our hospitals.
We've unleashed our most potent weapon of all, the courage of the American people.
Balance of Power with David Weston on Bloomberg Radio.
President Trump comes under fire for his aggressive response to demonstrations protesting the killing of an unarmed black man in Minneapolis. Jobless claims continue to rise at historic levels, but not as quickly, and the nation debates how to police itself. From New York, welcome to the second hour of Bloomberg Balance of Power. I'm David Weston. That horrific incident out in Minneapolis has triggered more than demonstrations. The nation is also taking a hard look at our police efforts, how we supervise them, and what return we get on our investment. We welcome now the Reverend Joe Watkins, Senior Consultant to Causeway Strategies and former aide to President George Herbert Walker Bush. So welcome, Joe. It's so good to have you here. Always is. Give us your perspective on the reaction within the minority community, black community, but also Hispanic, to the police incidents and what should be done. Some people say we should just be spending less money on our police.
Well, thanks for having me, David. It's always great to be with you. I think that what is particularly heartening for the country to see is the response on the part not only of people of color but of white people as well, who have joined with black people and brown people to say that that what happened was horrific. A couple of weeks ago, that the killing of George Floyd at the hands of the police in Minneapolis was an horrific event, and something worth certainly demonstrating or protesting about. And so there's been really a mass response to it, certainly on the part of people of color, black people in the country. This is yet another painful episode. We've had too many, of course, in the past few months. And this is just another painful reminder that the country is desperately in need of some kind of legislative remedy, probably in the form of police reform, in order to stop this from happening again. And I've said it, but I'm not the only one. There are others, people, Republicans and Democrats alike, people who come from various backgrounds, who've said that we would do well to consider real police reform, that is national standards, national policing standards, especially as it relates to the use of excessive force as a way to combat this problem going forward. And I think that makes a lot of sense. There was a very well-written piece on Cato.org by the Hentoffs that talks about this and how this can be achieved in a reasonable way legislatively.
And actually, Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi says that she's going to have some proposed legislation out as soon as Monday for federal, nationwide police reform. At the same time, we've increased our spending significantly since the 1960s per capita on police. But if you look at it, and there's a great piece out of the Bloomberg today really going through and plotting this, it doesn't appear that there's a natural relationship between the level of crime being committed and the number of police. To what extent is this a function of politics, if I could put it that way, and to some extent police unions, and in some places getting more and more funding, including for things like some of those SWAT teams we see out, those riot gear police?
Well, of course, politics is always involved in all these matters, but at the same time, one has to take into consideration the capital spent and lost when you have massive demonstrations around the country, as we've seen over the last 2 weeks, with property destroyed and the like. There's been a tremendous cost to that. So the cost to do something certainly outweighs the cost of doing nothing, I think, in this case. I think that police reform, certainly national standards, has to be done wisely, has to be done in a thoughtful way. It's not most of these challenges don't just need to have money thrown at them. These are challenges that need to be considered seriously by people on all sides, and then thoughtfully funded, so that you aren't wasting money, throwing money at something in a way that isn't thoughtful or useful going forward. So I think it would be helpful to have certainly police and the best minds from police forces around the country involved in the decision-making process, along with members of Congress, as well as people from various community organizations, and certainly the key minority community organizations like the Urban League and the NAACP and some others involved in the process. That would certainly go a long way towards having a reasonable solution, and with legislators doing their best to make sure that it's done in a reasonably cost-efficient way.
Let me ask you to put a different hat on, if I could. You are a man of the cloth. You are an ordained minister, and you have your own congregation in Philadelphia. We have seen criticism of President Trump, Republican president. You served under George Herbert Walker Bush. Criticism from some clergy about the way he has gone out there and held up the Bible in front of St. John's Church, the way he went to the National Shrine, the Catholic Cathedral in D.C. As a clergyman, what is your reaction to the president's invocation of the Bible and religion in connection with law and order and dealing with these demonstrations and even riots?
I always tell my people to hear the words of the Bible and to consider what the Bible says about how we are to conduct ourselves, how Christian people should conduct themselves, and to use discernment in engaging what people do in their outside actions. So I just think it's wise for Christian people, certainly people of faith, to use discernment in all of this, and to be guided by what we call God's Spirit in us, in terms of how they react to their fellow man, and certainly to the actions of our elected officials. I'm not quick to criticize people. I know how difficult it is to be president of the United States, having served on the staff of a U.S. president. I know that certainly there are tremendous pressures from all sides to make pronouncements, and certainly every move that a president makes is closely gauged by the media and by the public. But I would just urge calm in all of this, and people not have a rush to judgment.
Yeah. Joe, wise advice, as always. Thank you so much to Joe Watkins of Causeway Strategies. Coming up, we're going to talk about General Jim Mattis and his criticism of the president. Jonathan Bernstein thinks that's a big deal. That's coming up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
Reopenings.
Is there a likelihood that we have a sustained recovery?
Requirements.
Lawmakers have passed sweeping legislation.
Returns.
The president signed an executive order.
Bloomberg Daybreak with Karen Moscow and Nathan Hager.
We continue our Bloomberg Radio team coverage.
Everything you need now.
Let's head to Washington now.
Bloomberg Daybreak. Weekday mornings at 5 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Hi, we're the Goo Goo Dolls. We're fortunate that our daughters have what they need to grow and learn. But that isn't the case for nearly 13 million kids in the U.S. that struggle with hunger.
Childhood hunger is a heartbreaking reality that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and provides it to families and children in need.
You can help kids in need in your community by visiting feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies? Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
Hope you enjoyed your meal. And I just want to say, he's lucky to have a brother like you.
Lucky? Caring for my brother is far from easy. But he's a part of me, like my arms and legs, so I'll be his. No time for tired. Nothing can disable this love. He needs me, but I'm the lucky one, even though I need help now and then.
If you're caring for a loved one, visit aarp.org/caregiving for care guides and community support for your strength. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
This is a message from the government about the emergency measures to support the economy during the period of disruption caused by the coronavirus. To help you, your business, and your workers affected, you can apply for cash grants, business rate holidays, statutory sick pay relief packages, as well as the coronavirus job retention and self-employment income support schemes. For information, go to gov.uk/business-support now.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Hi, I'm Dan from NatWest Manchester branch. We know life's hard right now, but if coronavirus has affected your finances, we're doing our best to make things easier. If you're a personal customer, you can request a 3-month payment break if you're struggling with your mortgage, loan or credit card. Or if you need help with an existing arranged overdraft, you could get £500 interest-free for 3 months. Remember, every one of us is here to support you. There are lots of ways we could help. Search NatWest Coronavirus.
Eligibility and conditions apply to payment breaks. Overdraft up to your agreed limit if lower than £500.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are working to
get things moving.
Sending spices to novice cooks.
Hairbands to kids.
Desks for home offices.
Delivering the goods.
Shipping footballs. Fruit trees.
And dishwashers.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
Wondering what to play next? Want to know what other TuneIn listeners are listening to right now? Head to the trending section under Browse to explore the most popular stations and podcasts on TuneIn today. Millions of listeners like you can't be wrong.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
Yeah, but it's unique times. I think there's unique circumstances, and we're trying
to stand out stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Stocks are slumping with the S&P down 15 at 3107, a drop there of 0.5%. The Dow's down 68, down 0.3. NASDAQ is down 63. That is a drop of 0.7%. Stocks lower as concerned the recent rally has gone too far, too fast, overshadows new stimulus measures and encouraging economic data. The 10-year down 19/32, yield now 0.81%. Gold is up 1%, $17.17 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude, little change, down 1 cent right now, $37.29 a barrel. First day of trading for Zoom Info Technologies. That's the business intelligence platform. It is soaring after raising $935 million in its initial public offering, priced above a targeted range. Shares of Zoom Info Technologies up now by 71%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It's time now for Bloomberg Opinion, and today we're joined by columnist Jacob Bernstein. So welcome. It's great to have you with us. You've got a piece out now on Jim Mattis and why his parting ways with President Trump really is a big deal. Explain why that is, Jonathan.
Well, you know, we aren't used to something like this. For a member of a cabinet, someone who used to be in the president's cabinet to turn around and not just, this isn't Secretary of Education or, something in the mind. This is Secretary of Defense comes out and says the president is making a mockery of the Constitution and calls him essentially immature. That's a pretty rare and fairly extreme criticism.
And he's not alone in this. We also had Mike Mullen, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, coming out in Atlantic also, coincidentally. We've had other former military officials, as well as Mark Esper. But as a practical matter, is that going to change any of the people that otherwise might vote for Donald Trump?
Well, it's not going to have a direct effect. There's nobody out there who's sort of saying, well, I need to know what Jim Mattis thinks. And as soon as Mattis speaks, they change their mind. But what it does is it sort of changes at the elite level, it moves people a little bit. So that, we already saw a couple Republican senators. Senator Murkowski comes out and says, well, this may be a time to move, to question whether I'm even supporting Trump for re-election, Republican senator. The more that happens, it also, on the other side, it will give Democrats more license to say, well, of course, we all know, and Jim Mattis says the president is immature. And those people who are in the sort of neutral media, it pushes them also a little bit towards feeling more confident to sort of, say without qualification that, yeah, this guy is abusing the Constitution. He's abusing his power.
Are we seeing this show up at all in public sentiment so far? We have the right track, wrong track numbers we had yesterday, which were pretty bad. The wrong track was like 74% from Monmouth. At the same time, President Trump's approval rating isn't plummeting, is it?
No, but it is. What's happened is it moved up a little bit in April, in March, as a reaction to the pandemic, but just a few points, whereas, governors were moving up 10, 20 points, other foreign leaders were moving up their approval ratings 20, 30, 40 points. And he's lost all of that now, and maybe come a little below where he was. So he's hitting sort of his disapproval numbers are close to the highs for the last, 6 months or so. He's at a point where it would be hard for a president to get reelected, as unpopular as he is. He's not moving to record unpopularity, but there aren't presidents who get reelected when they're at 42% or so approval.
We're still a long way from November, at least in political terms. This is a lifetime, and so who knows what the situation is going to be come November. But as you look out there, what do you think might make a difference in public sentiment, either for or against the president? It had been thought that he basically would be running on the economy. The economy, it looks like it's unlikely to be back to where it was before the pandemic, much less better. At the same time, if it's moving up, will that be enough?
It's an open question. Normally, I would say, the political science models say, well, where you are in the second quarter, actually, of the election year tends to be the big factor in re-election. So obviously, the second quarter is going to be, horrendous. But because we're expecting, third quarter to be up by quite a bit, although, like you said, still nothing like a full recovery. And also because that it was a recession caused deliberately to treat, the coronavirus. It's possible that, past models won't hold, but it seems to me that every day we go by and he's still lagging and he's still not showing any sign of recovery. And in fact, if anything, he's losing more ground. It becomes more and more likely that he's in big trouble.
A wise man once said to me, in politics, it takes somebody to beat nobody. And so that raises a question, whatever difficulties President Trump may or may not be having, is Joe Biden stepping into that vacuum?
It does take somebody to beat nobody, but with presidential elections, you've always got somebody. Biden is going to be adequate. I don't know that he's going to...
That's a ringing endorsement. Adequate, yeah.
I don't know that he's going to stir a lot of it. But the truth is that out-party candidates in presidential elections don't really make that much of a difference if the president's on the ballot. It really does become a referendum on the president. And, one of the things that you wouldn't believe, but Ronald Reagan in 1980 actually was a lousy Republican candidate. He was thought to be extreme. He was thought to be a warmonger, which wasn't true. But Jimmy Carter was so unacceptable to people that they wound up voting for Reagan. And then most of them wound up liking it by 1984. I think Biden is certainly acceptable to most people who would consider voting against Trump.
And finally, what about the money? It looks like President Trump's going to have plenty of money as a practical matter. Joe Biden's fundraising seems to be going up. At the same time, there are reports now out that President Trump is having to spend money places he didn't think he was going to have to, like Ohio.
Yeah, my guess is that everybody's going to have more than enough money so that you get diminishing returns. Money in a presidential general election tends not to be all that important because there's so much information about both candidates and certainly about Donald Trump that a few ads or even a lot of ads or, whatever, mail, whatever kind of electioneering you do, really can't push things that much. People are going to wind up with strong opinions about whether they want Donald Trump to be president for 4 more years or not.
Yeah, referendum on the incumbent, likely so. Okay, thank you so much to Bloomberg columnist Jonathan Bernstein. You can read more on this and other stories from Bloomberg Opinion at Bloomberg.com/opinion and on the terminal by typing in OPIN GO. Coming up, President Trump says he may call in federal troops to quell violence. We talk with Scott Anderson of Columbia Law School about the law, the history, and the policy. That's next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Stocks are lower as investors ponder the latest jobs data. The Dow is down 85 points, 1/3%. The S&P is 0.5% lower, while the Nasdaq has dropped 2/3%. There were 1.9 million first-time jobless claims last week, less than the week before. But the surprise was that continuing claims rose sharply, indicating people are not being called back to work as quickly as hoped. Tomorrow, we will get the nationwide jobless numbers for May, and the unemployment rate is expected to jump to 19.5%, the highest since the 1930s. More stimulus aid could be on the way. The Trump administration is considering as much as $1 trillion in the next round. The Senate, though, is not expected to act on any stimulus measure until late July. Airline stocks are surging, with American Airlines up the most, 24%, after boosting the number of flights in July and saying travelers are hungry to fly again. Mona Rivera, Bloomberg Radio.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
You're living in a world built on science, political and economic.
You've got to believe the labor market gets hit.
Computer and medical.
Clarify where we are on a test.
It all makes a difference.
What do you think needs to happen in terms of governmental response?
And it's all here.
He expects the virus to peak quite a long time from now.
Get your science straight.
The hand washing campaign, is this actually a good strategy?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
A police officer.
Someone who protects the people.
Protects the vulnerable.
Focus on doing the right thing.
Building trust in your community.
Representing one.
Representing all.
Someone who is there in times of uncertainty.
Every day is different.
As a police officer,
you can make an impact.
Now's the time to make your difference. Become one of the 20,000 new officers. Search Join the Police.
Hi, I'm Dan from NatWest Manchester branch. We know life's hard right now, but if coronavirus has affected your finances, we're doing our best to make things easier. If you're a personal customer, you can request a 3-month payment break if you're struggling with your mortgage, loan or credit card. Or if you need help with an existing arranged overdraft, you could get £500 interest-free for 3 months. Remember, every one of us is here to support you. There are lots of ways we could help. Search NatWest Coronavirus.
Eligibility and conditions apply to payment breaks. Overdraft up to your agreed limit if lower than £500.
At Asda, we're helping you shop safely by keeping our stores clean and limiting customer numbers so you can keep 2 meters apart. With our Scan and Go mobile app, you can reduce contact at the till too. Asda, we're all in this together. Subject to availability. Mobile data charges may apply.
At Tesco, we've price matched Aldi on hundreds of products like bananas, peppers, chicken breasts, mushrooms, Warburton's bread, strawberries, even avocados. That's Tesco products at Aldi prices. Because now more than ever, every little helps. Tesco. Prices checked on comparable products from GBLD stores and online twice weekly. Price most often found matched excluding promotions. Selected Tesco stores excluding Express and all Northern Ireland stores. Products and their availability vary weekly and by store. Details at tesco.com/Aldi price match.
This is Mike Golick from ESPN's Golick and Wingo. Every morning, Trey Wingo, my son, and I sit down to discuss all the news, drama, and highlights spinning the sports world that day. And with TuneIn, you can hear us whenever and wherever you go. Just search Golick and Wingo to start listening today.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
And as we get set,
Buckle up, race fans.
NASCAR is back in the driver's seat.
And you can cut straight to the action here.
With the Performance Racing Network on TuneIn, you can hear PRN's live coverage of some of this year's top events.
As NASCAR's top drivers, Kevin Harvick,
Clint Boyer, and more get back on the track.
Search Performance Racing Network to listen and see upcoming races.
Wanna bet football can make you feel nostalgic?
Playing days are over, so...
On the podcast, NFL Alumni Lounge, Charlie Booth sits down with retired NFL legends to talk about their careers, life after football, and everything in between.
Mr. Darren Waller, good to have you.
Yes, sir, it's good to be here.
Dana White, welcome to the Alumni Lounge.
Thanks for having me, brother.
Big member of our NFL alumni family, the CEO of the XFL, Mr. Oliver Luck.
Charlie, good to see you. Thanks for having me.
We're here with the president, Mr. Eric Price. Good to see you.
Search NFL Alumni Lounge on TuneIn to listen.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Balance of Power with David Weston.
Coming up on Balance of Power, using federal troops to restore order within the United States. It's been done before, and President Trump says it may be time to do it again. Scott Anderson of Columbia Law School is here to take us through the law and the history of the Insurrection Act. But first, let's get a market check with Charlie Pellet.
Hi, thank you very much, David Weston. We are lower across the board right now. Stocks are slumping as concerned the recent rally has gone too far, overshadows new stimulus measures and encouraging economic data. S&P 500 index heading for its first loss in 5 days. The tech-heavy NASDAQ 100 index also slumped after briefly climbing to an intraday record. Here's where we stand. S&P now down 16 points, a drop of 0.5%. The Dow lower by 62, down 0.2%. NASDAQ is down 61, down 0.6%. In the year-to-date column on the Bloomberg, NASDAQ still showing a gain of 7.2%. 10-year down 19.30 seconds with a yield of 0.81%. Gold is up 1.2%, 17.19 the ounce, and West Texas Intermediate crude down 0.3% at 37.18 a barrel. Jobless claims are showing tentative signs of moderation, but still running in the millions in the wake of the coronavirus. And with that story, here's Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
Last week's tally, 1.88 million jobless claims, the lowest since March. Still, that's 1.88 million more cases of worry, heartbreak, or worse. And Federal Reserve officials see high unemployment persisting into early next year, the first anniversary of the outbreak. Since March, the U.S. has tallied more than 40 million jobless claims. On Friday, the government is expected to report unemployment topped 19% in May, an echo of the Great Depression. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Radio.
Apple CEO Tim Cook is calling on his company to do more to fight systemic injustices and racial inequality in an open letter responding to the protests sweeping the U.S. this week. In a letter posted on the iPhone maker's website, Cook said, quote, "To create change, we have to re-examine our own views and actions in light of a pain that is deeply felt but too often ignored." Apple shares are lower now by 0.7%. Again, capping S&P down 16, down 0.5%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Balance of Power continues. Once again, here's your host, David Weston.
Thanks so much, Charlie Pellet. Back in 1807, Congress passed the Insurrection Act, permitting the president in times of emergency to call in federal troops to restore order within the United States. It's been used several times since then, often at the request of state government. But President Trump has said he may invoke it to send in federal troops to stop violent protests even over the objection of local government. Scott Anderson is a senior fellow at Columbia Law School's National Security Law Program, and we welcome him now to Bloomberg. So, Scott, thank you so much for being with us. Give us a bit of the history. One of the things I didn't know before is 1807. It's not a coincidence because there was an Aaron Burr who was trying to overthrow Thomas Jefferson. I guess that's the origins of this thing.
To some extent, yeah. Since the founding of the Republic, even prior to 1807, there have been a number of similar laws, usually called the Calling Forth Acts, that implement Congress's authority under the Constitution to mobilize the militias, which were at the time were the kind of dominant military of the United States, of the individual states, to use them to put down insurrections and other sorts of acts. Congress, in those initial acts, actually made it a pretty limited power, setting time limits on the extent to which the president could invoke it before needing to get congressional authorization, things like that. But by 1807, they had become more comfortable with the way presidents had exercised that authority and adopted the predecessor of the current Insurrection Act, which is a provision that essentially allows the president to, where certain conditions are met, invoke both to mobilize the state militias and also to use the active duty forces, which of course today play a much more prominent role in our military, to enforce U.S. law and put down restrictions domestically in the United States. But again, only where certain conditions are met. Subsequently, several decades later, in the post-Civil War era, it was amended further to allow for the federal enforcement of essentially civil rights, particularly the Equal Protection Clause against the states. And of course, that's where it came into use in the 1950s and 1960s, when we saw presidents use the Insurrection Act to send federal troops in to enforce desegregation orders and to protect people engaged in civil rights activities such as the Selma March. And so it's played a very interesting role and different role over the course of history in its relationship to certainly civil rights, but also the broader civil-military relations.
One of the more recent instances when it's been invoked that's maybe more similar, at least in appearance to what we have here now, is the riots in Los Angeles following the Rodney King situation. At the same time, in that situation, I believe the governor of California actually asked for the troops, didn't he?
He did, and there is a provision of the Insurrection Act that applies for that, which is where, under the Insurrection Act, it actually is supposed to be the state legislature that makes a request for the federal troops under the Insurrection Act, or the governor if the state legislature cannot convene. So it's actually not 100% clear from the record as I've seen it, and it's actually something I'm looking into currently for a piece, to see whether that provision was actually relied on in 1992, or whether President Bush was actually relying upon some of the other authorities that allow the president to go into California that don't require a request from California. That said, as a political matter, certainly the governor of California did make that request, and President Bush was very careful to couch his action as a response to that request from the state of California, so as to, at least from a political perspective, not be infringing upon sovereignty.
You're a student of this Insurrection Act. Give us your best judgment, if you will. Is there any doubt that President Trump, if he decides to, has the authority, the legal authority to invoke this Insurrection Act to call in federal troops to quell riots right now?
I think there is a real question there, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's one that we're going to see a response from the courts on. The question is essentially, does the Insurrection Act cover the sort of scenario we're describing? And the Insurrection Act really is supposed to respond to three different scenarios. A case of request from a state. B, a situation where the courts and the justice system aren't able to operate, where the courts are essentially non-functional. And C, a situation where civil rights, individual civil rights are being obstructed, or where we see the federal authority to enforce the law being obstructed, meaning people are actively resisting and undermining the enforcement of federal law. Do any of the current situation out there that we see really rise to that level? What we tend to see in most of the cases happening right now are a lot of peaceful protests, which even the president says that's not what I'm aiming at. I'm aiming at the other unlawful conduct, which is rioting and looting. But has that rioting and looting risen to a level that it is threatening population's rights under the Equal Protection Clause? Does it rise to the level that the courts can't operate? Does it rise to the level that the federal government really can't enforce the law? It's supposed to be something much more systemic and broader than simple unlawfulness by some people. If that were the standard, the president could use the Insurrection Act to enforce all sorts of laws around the country all the time. But of course, we see this as a pretty exceptional act that's supposed to meet that sort of high threshold. And I'm just not 100% sure that in all cases it can rise there. Maybe certain cities it can, maybe certain neighborhoods. But in all cases, I think that's a harder sell.
But Scott, you made an important introductory phrase there. That doesn't necessarily mean that the courts can do anything to enforce it. There are some rights and corresponding obligations that may exist without a corresponding remedy. Suppose the president invoked it and he was wrong. Who's going to take him to court, and what are the courts going to say?
So I don't think there's much doubt that there'd be a lot of people who could sue, who have what lawyers call standing to sue the president over this sort of action, because of course invoking the military is going to affect lots of people directly, including people who are arrested or possibly engaged in situations of assault or otherwise inconveniences or danger because of these troop deployments. That's not hard to envision. The real question is the court going to step into the situation where it raises kind of genuine separation of powers questions between what Congress has authorized and how the president is interpreting it and applying it. The Insurrection Act is not worded super narrowly, in part because it's a largely antiquated bill, and statutes tend to be worded pretty broadly, and in part because it does delegate a lot of authority to the president. One provision in particular specifically hinges itself on the president's subjective evaluation of the circumstances. So it's harder to see a court intervening in those cases. I don't know if that means it's impossible, but it certainly would be a more exceptional outcome, and one I think a lot of judges will be hesitant to embrace. That said, even President Trump's most recent Supreme Court nominee, Justice Kavanaugh, famously once said that few things are likely to incur the court's wrath more than the president acting contrary to a statutory prohibition. And in this case, when the president is claiming to act in the Insurrection Act that doesn't have that authority, he's violating another provision of law. The Comitatus Act.
That's a whole other discussion. Okay, many thanks now to Scott Anderson of Columbia Law School. That was terrific. Coming up, we talk with Ewan Relly of BDA Partners on the effects of civil unrest and the coronavirus on business here and abroad. That's next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.